Good evening, everyone. It is Monday, September 19, 2016 at 5 p.m. It's a meeting of the Oregon Village Board, so I'd like to call to order and request roll call, please.
Brethauer. Grenier.
Here.
Carpenter. Here. Boudreaux.
Here.
Staton.
Here.
Bollig.
Here.
Poole.
Thank you. Item 3 is public appearances.
Steve,
Item A.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we just mention about those memos on the table?
Oh,
before you
yes,
go?
thank you.
Sorry about that.
Remind me of that. So if there are people here for the discussion about the Methodist Church property, there are memos on the table right at that front right-hand corner for you. You can pick those up as we're going here, please.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. So under public appearances, item A, we had the first reading at the September 12th board meeting. Discussion of possible action regarding approve amending the current planned development district zoning at 131 West Richards Road through proposed general development plan. The recommended motion is to waive the second reading and move for adoption of ordinance number 16-29, amending the current planned development district zoning at 131 West Richards Road through proposed general development plan.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a
Second.
Second, thank you. Is anybody here to represent that item?
I see a couple of gentlemen back there in the.
Okay, if you want to come up to the microphones, please identify yourselves and let us know what's up.
So Steve, we had the first reading at the last meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, just, yeah. There's the other one.
A little bit of storm on the other side of town.
Yeah,
Tree
we
on
had
the
some
hand.
for a bit too.
Man. All right. Park Street was flooded.
Only half of it.
Yeah,
Fortunately, it was the half going the other way. that
half
I
going
was
in was flooded. I wasn't too bad, mine coming out.
It was.
Okay, so we're ready? Yeah.
Yes, we're ready.
You want to tell us what's
I'll let
up
you-
here, please? Just a
We
quick
just
summary.
set up so you can.
Oh, okay.
describe.
Well, hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Well, we've got the Dorn project, and we're looking for approval on that. And I think everybody's got the paperwork on it. And, I think we were here last week and we went over it, but does anybody have any further questions? It's going to be a phased project over 3 phases. Right now, I think they're kind of going back and forth on whether to build the first building on Main Street or build one similar to that around the corner on Richards, but either way, there'd be one that has frontage on Main. And then eventually, the hardware store would be in one of the buildings behind it. And it'd be, the first building would be mixed use, be retail, office retail. Tentatively right now, I think the hardware store, or the pharmacy is planning on coming into one of those buildings.
Okay,
And then it would be apartments / condos on second and third floor. I mean, our plan is to make the entire thing a condominium. Just logistically, it's easier, and if you ever do want to sell them down the road, So I think there was a concern that if it's phased in, and that if different LLCs own the phases, I think it'll be just a combination of the same people. But there was a concern there that there wouldn't be access to all the parking, and having a condominium would alleviate that problem because it would all be common area. So that's probably what we'll do at this point. So other than that, we're looking forward to it.
yep, as are we. Have any questions or comments over here? We talked about this last.
How many do you plan to have? How many apartments and condos or whatever?
Tentative plan is 31. It's a mix. It's either 30 or 31, but it's a mix of efficiencies, 1s and 2s. It'll be mostly efficiencies and 1s. There'll be a few 2s in there. I think our demographic is going to be a mix of young couples, probably some retirees. I mean, it will have an elevator, so we're looking at this point to, I'd say we're 85% it's gonna be underground parking too. So we shouldn't have a parking issue. I know that we had looked at that. If we add that underground parking, that'll definitely take care of that problem. And I think just all the new stuff I've looked at, to be competitive, I think you have to have it in Wisconsin.
Right. But thank you. That's great.
Sure.
Any other questions over here? Any comments from staff? No. Okay, so we're all set to go.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so we have the motion and second for ordinance number 16-29, amending the current planned development district at 131 West Richards Road through the proposed general development plan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You're all set.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So item B is consideration and possible action regarding assignment and assumption agreement relating to assignment of grant agreement by Willie Enterprises to Willie Properties LLC. Is there anyone here to represent that?
And Matt can do a little explanation.
I mean, let me just, this might be pretty quick. So the development agreement between the village and, it's currently between the village and Willie Enterprises LLC, which is kind of the entity that you were operating under. And so when I talked to your legal counsel, he indicated that your plan is to take title to the property and to develop under a different LLC that you formed, Willie Properties LLC.
Correct.
And so we just needed to have an agreement authorizing and approving the assignment of the development agreement to the new entity, and that's all this does. Did you close Friday?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right.
So I'll
it's-
make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. Anything you want to say, Brad?
Thank you. Yeah.
We haven't voted yet.
Yeah, I guess yeah.
You better let us do that first.
No, you summed it up pretty good. We're just changing the name or formed a new LLC to own the land, and then I'm gonna lease it to myself to operate the business
Okay.
out of. So
Okay.
that's what we're doing.
Any other questions or comments over here? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You're all set.
And then
Now
we-
I say thank you.
That's right. It's better timing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brad.
Brad, you can probably sit there because we're going to talk about your CUP, but can you also sign this before you leave, please?
I can.
Save you a trip to the village hall.
Yep.
Okay, so that takes us to the next item C, conceptual discussion with Brad Willie regarding potential new user of rental space in the business park building. There's a note, any new user of that space would require amending the conditional use permit for the property.
So I included the page out of the CUP, which indicated, I think Matt maybe explained this when we were going through this, that the CUP for Brad's property is strictly for the academy. It sounded that if he wants to bring somebody else in there, he has to do an amendment to the CUP. That's why Brad's here tonight,
Okay.
to talk about it with the board.
I have a question, if it's not too soon. Anytime Brad changes a leasee, do we have to go through this, or once?
That's the way the CUP is currently set up.
Can I speak to that a minute?
Absolutely, man.
It seems cumbersome, is
Yeah.
the reason I bring it up.
So that's true with respect to how the conditional use permit that exists today was approved, because he's got a truck repair business, and then he wanted to add to that a use that is a little unique to add to that kind of a business, which was the Academy of Sound tenant. We need a conditional use permit for, I think, two reasons here. Mike Slavny's here, so he'll catch me if I'm wrong. I think one of them is, this is a group development. Once we approve a conditional use permit as a group development, I think then the group development component is approved. But the other reason is that this particular use and this particular user required conditional use approval. So certainly there would be a need for an amendment or an approval of a new conditional use permit for a new user at this point. Whether there would be a need for additional amendments after that, I think will depend on the nature of the approval you give in amending this. So it'll depend on how broadly you you define what uses are allowed when you amend this. When we did it before, our understanding and expectation was it was going to be Academy of Sound, and so that's how we drafted it. Knowing that now there might be more fluidity, I guess we'll have to see. You haven't actually applied for this yet, correct?
He's here for
No.
conceptual discussion.
Yeah, this is a conceptual discussion, so he needs to think about, and then the board will need to be thinking about, what exactly are you applying for in terms of conditional use approval? So conceivably, you could grant approval in a way that creates more flexibility to facilitate adjustments without having to come back, or not, I guess, depending on what Bradley applies for.
Will that go back to planning?
It will. He'll have to start
Okay.
at planning and then come here.
I'm
But-
content to let planning deal with it then.
Well, so Jerry, the reason why Brad's here, if it wasn't for his request to have the new user serve wine, I would have just said, Brad, schedule a public hearing. But I didn't want him to be, or we didn't want him to be wasting his time and money if the board had an issue with the wine and the other user, or new user, I should say. That's why it's conceptual in front of the board.
I have no further questions.
You know, the only comment I have, I read the write-up in the package, and it was very well done. I really appreciate that. In my mind, I kind of envision that area to be more of a light industrial area, and I could see a wood shop going in there, or a sole proprietor that's maybe does electrical work, or something like that going
Yep.
in there, much easier than I could see retail or a service industry going in there. So I think my initial concerns would be that the business that you brought forward conceptually doesn't really fit into that light industrial area and fits more into that service-oriented area.
Sure. Yeah, and I know, I see exactly what you're saying there. Well, we had a unique opportunity the first time too. It's just trying to find something to fit in there.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to do, and I thought it was a pretty good idea too. So it's up to you guys to see if it's what we want, though.
So just to clarify for you, Bradley, I mean, the purpose of this meeting is for you to get feedback from the board. They're not going to make a final decision on anything
Correct.
tonight.
Yep.
So this is your opportunity to have a discussion and see what kind of feedback you get. So far, you've got one trustee expressing some concern about whether it's an appropriate use.
Yep.
And I don't want to step on planning's toes, so I'm anxiously awaiting to see the outcome of the planning meeting that deals with this.
But I think you have to, well, I may be wrong about this.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Okay. You gotta talk about the use, but you also have to talk about the wine serving on the property. And so the wine serving on the property is not a plan commission thing, that's a village board decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, he hasn't applied for the license
No,
yet,
no.
but what he's proposing is, as I understand, it's kind of a woodworking shop where people would
Correct.
would come in and make things, and they'd be able to drink while they were there as part of the, whatever the operation is. And so
Yep.
if you're concerned about, is that ultimately something the board's going to be comfortable with, this is a chance to get a preview of how they're thinking about it.
Sure. So yeah, I guess, do you guys fully understand what is being proposed? It'd be like a wood workshop. She'll also do retail stuff and some online stuff and selling wooden signs and other projects like that. So there will be a wood workshop aspect of it, no doubt. But the other part of it too is it's being proposed that you can have like nights where you can go there and you can get a group of friends, like bachelorette parties or any type of party, just like a girls' night out or something like that. They can go there, hammer a sign together, drink a glass of wine, and then leave. The only reason that the wine was brought up in this is because the only other competition in the area, there's one in Mount Horeb and Sun Prairie, and that's what they do. They serve wine. So that was the thought, well, would anybody go to it if you can go to Mount Horeb or Sun Prairie and have more fun? But at the same time, I say have more fun. This is not a bar. People are not coming there to drink or just drink. They're coming there to make their project 2 to 3 hours, and then they're out the door. It's kind of kind of one of those things. It's not a bar. It's not what I want. I don't want that next door. So
They could bring their own wine though? Then we, no.
No.
I don't think bringing their own wine would be feasible.
Oh, okay, I don't know. Just a question I'm gonna ask.
So a question I have, Brad, how is use of power tools consistent with drinking alcohol?
well, that's actually a better question for Amanda. But yeah, I don't think. Well, I've never done it. I don't know what. So,
Good
I'm not asking for a confession.
yeah,
I'm talking about the business.
yeah. I mean, there's going to be an instructor there too. So it's not like people are going to be using power tools and saws and willy-nilly drinking wine and cutting fingers off. They're going to be supervised with an instructor, and do you even cut any?
Everything is pre-cut and like set out at a station. They register online, pick what they want to make. So everything is like pre-set out for them. They'll have a stencil to put on their wood, and then at the end,
Could we get your name,
it just
please?
gets put together. Amanda
Your last name, please.
Crompton,
Address?
Cottage Grove.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I think, is there any power tools? A drill, maybe.
A drill at the end to put the hanger
Okay.
on or something.
Okay, so minimal.
Really, a screwdriver would
Minimal
probably be
power
fine.
tools.
Yeah, it sounds like all the cutting and that stuff's done beforehand.
Okay.
So,
I envision power saws and planers and
yeah.
blades and stuff like that.
No, I don't think so. That's not a good girls' night activity. So,
So what Brad and Amanda are looking for is, our wiki that's going to planning now is going to come back to us to have a discussion about giving a license for wine.
Okay.
And this is not binding on anybody, this is just preliminary feedback.
yep, that's what we want. We just want to know if it's something that the board is interested in. If you guys are, awesome. If not, we'll figure something out. So,
From the nods I saw, I think people were saying, go to planning, come back, and we're willing to consider it.
Yeah.
perfect.
So, does that give you what you need?
I think so.
Okay, good. I think that takes care of 3C. Thank you.
Thank
Yep,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. We'll get you a copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Brad.
Actually.
Okay, that takes us to item D, which is referred from the August 15th to 22nd board meetings. Monumental Enterprise Incorporated has an application for Class A combination fermented malt beverage and intoxicating liquor license for the property at 905 North Main Street, known as Oregon Beer and Beverage Company, Oregon, Wisconsin. And there are memos from the village attorney and Chief Ewell that are in from the August 22nd meeting that are included in the packet. So we're going to start with Mr. Dragney giving us a review, kind of updating from what we said. So we have that, applicants have that, and people that are watching have that. Then we'll ask Chief Ewell for his report, and then we'll have Mr. Makovec, did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, and so on, respond and give us their information. Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Dragney, Mr. Ewell, Chief Ewell, and then Mr. Makovec. So,
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Staton. So my intent is to kind of review for the board, refresh your memory on what the issues are, the questions are that you'll need to address tonight, and some of the legal issues that have an impact on the process of making those decisions. This is a little bit complicated, and I think you're going to receive a fair amount of information tonight. So I want to make sure we take our time and are methodical, and we do a good job properly analyzing the issues and making the decisions. So Monumental Enterprises, Inc., which is a Wisconsin corporation, has applied for an alcohol beverage license to operate a liquor store at what many of us would refer to perhaps as the old Alpine liquor store. The applicant, being a corporation, has designated Patrick Makovic as its designated agent. In light of the information that has been presented to the board in Chief Ewell's report, and in light of the application and the decisions that need to be made in connection with the application, I believe there are going to be 3 questions the board is going to have to address tonight, or at least before we get to the end of this process. First, the board has to determine whether Mr. McCovic is a satisfactory agent. What the statute says is that a corporation must appoint an agent who the village board deems acceptable with respect to their character, their record, and their reputation. Second, in light of the history that's been provided in the police chief's report, there is an issue the board needs to address relating to whether the, again, designated agent, Mr. McCovic, and I believe also the president of the corporation, is a habitual criminal offender within the meaning of the statute, such that the corporation is not qualified to hold a license. And third, the third question ultimately would be whether to grant or deny the license. So those are the questions that will be presented tonight. The procedure I'm going to recommend you follow is going to be similar to the last meeting. I'm going to suggest that Chief Ewell be given an opportunity to again review his report with the board, so to refresh everyone's recollection as to his report. And then we're going to give the applicant and his legal counsel an opportunity to present to the board. You'll have an opportunity to ask of the applicant and of Chief Ewell and me whatever questions you'd like to ask. After the presentations have been made, the board will then need to work through the process of addressing the issues. And I would hope that I'll be able to help you kind of break that into bite-sized, manageable pieces so that we can get through the process. So that's my outline of where I think we are tonight. And with that, perhaps Chief Ewell can provide his report, and then we can give the applicant an opportunity to address the board.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, just reviewing the memo. When I looked at the memo that I supplied, I realized it was a previous draft, so there is some additional information in this that wasn't presented earlier. But just to kind of go over this again, Monumental Enterprises, Mr. Makovic does have a criminal history. He has been convicted of criminal damage to property, 3 counts. He holds a valid driver's license. He does have some delinquent tax history as well. And those are outlined in the Circuit Court Access records. They date back to 1999, I believe was one of them. He does have some violations for liquor law violations, selling to underage, at Bob's and McFarland Liquor, the Village Liquor of Cottage Grove, selling tobacco to a minor, and Party Port in Madison. He has the liquor law violations there, selling to an underage person. And I also noted that he refused to cooperate with the Madison Police Department, although the attorney argues that. We can talk about that later at a different point. So in my conclusion, I recommend a denial of the Monumental Enterprises based on the fact that he provided false statements on his application. I outlined those on auxiliary questionnaire number 2 and in supplemental Class A liquor license on application number 15. I talked a little bit about his convictions that he had, about his deferred prosecution related to the stalking charges, which were felonies. I also want you to note that in my revised memo, based on the employee manual of Monumental Enterprises, which Mr. Makovic provided to us, his business, in my estimation, does not meet the village ordinance 12.05, parent 4E4, which relates to adopting policies related to responsible sales and service. He, as I read this, he instructs his employees to lie about products, as described in his customer service section of the employee manual. Under the personal information section, he instructs employees to lie about the location of where Mr. Makovic is, if asked. There's no effective date on this policy that it clearly where he clearly violated the dress code section by asking an employee to wear revealing clothes. That's backed up in police reports. And it also appears that he allows his employees to consume alcoholic beverages on duty, as evidenced by the language in employee tab section, and we can talk about that. I'm sure his attorney will have something to say about that language as well. But That's the additional paragraph that I ended. So then I basically went on in my memo to say that I recommend denying his application. And also believe that, you know, his criminality, those criminal charges were related to his business because some of those people were his employees. And some of those acts took place on business premises. And those were verified in police reports as well. So that's basically the rundown of the memo that I provided with a little bit of additional information. And I'll be happy to, once his attorney talks about some of the things that he's put down in his memo that he gave to us last minute, I'll talk a little bit more about that after he has had a chance to talk. Okay?
Any questions right now for either Mr. Gregney or Chief Ewell? Okay, so we'll go to the applicant, please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Charles Geeson, and I'm representing Patrick Makovic, who's seated to my side together with the applicant, Monumental Enterprises. I'd start by saying we've never been given the courtesy of a copy of this amended report from the chief, so I don't know if he's trying to ambush us here tonight or not. Having said that, we have his previous memo, and Mr. Makovic is fully prepared to respond to that. We had provided, in the hopes of sparing some effort and time tonight and to give you some background, a letter detailing our responses to the chief's original objections. And I'd like to highlight some of the points that we think are important in your consideration. First off, we know nothing about Patrick other than what we feel are false and defamatory and slanderous hearsay allegations in a police report, some going back 15, 20 years. And I'll get into that in a moment. But Patrick's a local businessman. He was born in Hillsborough, Wisconsin. He grew up in Lake Delton and is a 1971 graduate of Wisconsin Dells High School. He went to UW La Crosse after high school, then left to work at Kaminsky's grocery store in Wisconsin Dells, where he was the manager of the bakery and deli for 2 years. Patrick has worked hard and honestly his entire life. He's a credit to himself and to the communities and the businesses where he's lived and worked. His first job after Kaminsky's grocery store was in the financial service business for Penn Corp. He worked there from about 1972 through 2002, a span of about 30 years. And Patrick was quickly promoted and became the youngest branch manager anywhere in the company. He did well. He's very accomplished, and he's an astute businessman. He first became involved in the retail liquor business in 1996, while he was still working in the financial services. He bought Mike's on Regent. And I think it's important to emphasize that since then, Patrick has owned and operated 6 different liquor stores. And it's equally important to emphasize that there has never, ever been a complaint by McFarland, Cottage Grove, Fitchburg, any of those municipalities where Patrick has been doing business for a total of 65 years. He's a good operator. He's proven that he's a good operator. And we would urge you to ignore one incident in his entire life where he was charged with a crime, and that was a result of a very emotional, tumultuous breakup with his girlfriend at the time. And again, we don't want to try all of those allegations. I don't think you're interested in it. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's our function here. But suffice it to say, Patrick did accept responsibility for that. And mind you, that occurred in 2009. So that's 7 years ago. He has fully paid his debt to society. The prosecutor in that case, the Dane County District Attorney's Office, recognized his history, his character, and felt that he was an appropriate candidate for a deferred prosecution program. He entered into that, and he met all of his responsibilities. He attended every meeting. He attended and successfully completed an anger management alternatives to aggression type course. And you haven't heard, and the chief won't tell you, about a single incident of him being involved in any criminal activity since then. It's our view that in our society, we make mistakes. There's a price to pay for that. And Patrick has paid that price. He made full restitution besides all of his other obligations. And in our society, we don't hold something like that, a single transgression, against a person for their entire lifetime. That's just not fair, it's not just, and it's not right. And we would encourage you to not take that harsh, unrealistic, and disproportionate punitive response to Patrick. The objection is also based on the fact that there have been quote-unquote violations. Okay, there have been 2 sales of liquor to a minor and 1 pack of cigarettes that was sold to an underage person in the 65 years of operation of these stores. And what the chief doesn't say in his report is that Patrick was not present on any of those occasions. He didn't participate in those activities. He had no knowledge of them. The last one, the most recent one, the employee who sold to an underage person was terminated by Patrick for violating their policies against sales to underage persons. Patrick takes that extremely seriously, to the point where he'd fire and did fire an employee. In the packet that is in your email, you can see clearly on the store windows, the doors, whenever anybody comes into any of Patrick's stores, it's prominently posted, everyone in your party must be 21 or older to enter, no exceptions. And I'm not sure what policies the chief was referring to, but you'll hear from Patrick's managers and employees, they have absolutely firm direction to card anybody who could possibly even be under 30. And they do have, and we will show you, stacks, piles of confiscated fake ID cards. They take that seriously. If somebody presents a fake ID card and they recognize it as such, they seize it, they keep it. There is one criticism here, and I emphasize in my letter to you that this is not a violation, but there is a claim by the chief regarding a lack of cooperation with the Madison Police Department during the Mifflin Street Block Party. Well, first off, Patrick did return the call to the officer who had stopped by the party port asking for the names of people who'd purchased kegs during the week prior to the Mifflin Street Block Party in Madison. He never got a call back on that. Even if he had, that was the extent of cooperation that was possible, because like most businesses, he doesn't keep a list of his customers. If you walk in and buy a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of wine or a case of beer or a keg of beer, and you provide proper identification and make the purchase, pay for it, that's the end of the matter. He can't tell you who purchased what last week, last month. There's no requirement whatsoever that he do that. If the village thinks that that's important, we'd have no objection to a condition on the license. Write down the name of every keg purchaser. But that's not the law in Madison. That's not a legal obligation or requirement. You'll hear evidence tonight from Charles Prestigiacomo, who has roughly, well, many decades experience in the business. And it's never been his practice. It's not a common practice. You just don't do that. There's no legal requirement. There's no necessity for it. So what the chief had characterized as a lack of cooperation was simply an impossibility because Patrick did not have the information that was being sought. And again, we're a little bit skeptical about the rationale set forth for needing this information, and that is to go educate the Mifflin Street partygoers about the consumption of alcohol. Well, you know, the police can, and they do that. They can simply go to the Mifflin Street party and hand out whatever pamphlets, whatever information, engage in whatever conversations they want. Ironically, Patrick's liquor stores have been extremely supportive of local police and local charities in those jurisdictions where he is licensed. For example, when the Cottage Grove Police Department, its K-9 fundraising committee, I guess they lost a dog and they needed to replace it, they went to Patrick and he assisted them. He contributed financially. He did the same for the McFarland Police K-9 Department. And you have attached to the correspondence that I'd sent earlier certificates of appreciation to Patrick from those two police departments. It's not just the police departments that Patrick and his businesses support, but any number of other local charities. Any community should be proud to have Patrick as a businessman in their midst because he is supportive of the community. For example, the Cottage Grove Lions Club has commended him. That was attached to the letter that I emailed to you. Hospice Care and a Grace has been an enormous benefactor of Patrick's generosity. The Susan Komen for the Cure, the Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Foundation, and others that we list in the correspondence that was sent to you. In other words, Patrick's involved in the communities. He certainly gives back to them and supports their charities and their local police departments. He was named the best liquor store in McFarland for his community involvement in that community. In our view, it would be short-sighted to turn down this application because in any and every community Patrick has done business, he's given back to that community in spades. He's an active member of the communities that he does business in. Now, we also addressed, and I'd like to touch on, the recommendation by the chief that the application be denied because of habitual criminality. Well, frankly, that is just a false proposition. Our law, and your counselor can certainly tell you what it provides in that regard. It flies in the face of the presumption of innocence, and especially important, Mr. Makovic was only convicted on one occasion. That's not habitual criminality. That was that one case where he had a tiff with his girlfriend who was seeing another man unbeknownst to him initially. It's also buttressed by the fact that there's never, ever been any claim against Patrick for any work-related discrimination. nothing ever filed with any local, state, federal agency. In fact, you'll learn tonight that he treats his employees very well, and they hold him in very high regard in turn. He's never engaged in nor tolerated any sexual harassment on the job site, and his employees who are here tonight, some of them, and managers, will certainly corroborate that. Now, much has been made by the chief about what he maintains is a false statement on Patrick's application. Well, as we point out, Mr. Markovic has never been a student of the law. He's never been involved with a crime before, and he was charged only once in Dane County Circuit Court. And that case is public record. He doesn't deny that, doesn't dispute it. He paid the price, he paid his debt to society in that case. But he recently, well, not recently, he never had any intent to deceive or mislead anybody on this council. We all know, all you have to do is go look at CCAP, and you can see virtually every case that's ever been filed. But he answered that question without any intent to deceive or mislead you, but he had an honest, even though mistaken, belief that the whole case had been dismissed. And I ask you to look, I had sent to you an email containing the dismissal order from Judge Mary Ann Sumi. And technically, well, here's what the judge's order said, February 5th, 2013. On the state's motion and the file and proceedings herein, and specifically on the defendant's successful completion of his contract with the Dane County Deferred Prosecution Program and First Offender Program, it is hereby ordered that the above case is dismissed. And that was signed by Circuit Judge Mary Ann Sumi. So, again, we lawyers who deal with these things perhaps every day would be more familiar with this. Patrick had never been in criminal court in his life. He got an order saying that that entire case was dismissed. He completed his obligations. And in good faith and honest but mistaken belief, said that that did not exist anymore. It was dismissed. So he's paid his debt to society. He has a sterling reputation in the business community, and he shouldn't be burdened for life because of his misinterpretation of a case that's public record anyhow. He wasn't trying to conceal or hide anything from anyone. He had an honestly but mistaken belief that the case had been dismissed, and that's what the order says, if you read it, if you're not a lawyer. He wasn't trying to hide anything from anyone. He knew the case was still on CCAP, the Wisconsin Circuit Court program, and it's out there in the public. There's no effort to conceal anything. It was a misunderstanding on his part of the order signed by the judge that said the case was dismissed. I don't know how many of you are business people. I'm sure you've come in contact with a lot of businessmen and businesswomen. One of the objections to granting this license that's raised by the chief against Mr. Markovic is that, I believe on two occasions, one in 1999 and another in 2012, Mr. Markovic fell behind on some of his sales tax obligations. Well, I guess praise be to any businessman who's never struggled to meet a payroll or to pay every single tax installment that's due in full and on time. Mr. Makovic's been in business for more than 4 decades, and we have 2 periods where the taxes were not paid on time. But you can rest assured, he rectified that long before this ever came up, and has paid those taxes plus any interest to the municipality that was due then. He's paid every single dollar that he owes in taxes to any government agency, period. In fact, as we pointed out in the letter, he's paid over $1 million in the last 20 or so years in sales tax, property taxes, and personal income taxes. As members of the community, we should have more people who step up and contribute and give that much back, as Mr. Makovic does. Again, as we point out in the letter, and you'll hear tonight, among his business associates, people who know him, people who've dealt with him on a daily basis, Mr. Makovic has an absolutely sterling reputation. And I'm not talking about digging out some old police report by a disgruntled former girlfriend that was never, ever prosecuted, as has been done to defame and besmirch Mr. Makovic. But people who know him, people who've dealt with him day in, day out, can attest to his absolutely impeccable character. He is willing to make a strong 10-year commitment to Oregon, and his landlord, before entering into that sort of lease with him, vetted him and checked out his references and was very comfortable in entering into that long-term relationship with him. We're not asking you to make that sort of commitment, obviously. Should he stumble, should he not fulfill his obligations as a liquor licensee, you always have the power and the ability to take action against him. But it's telling that none of the other 4 jurisdictions where he does business, where he operates licensed liquor establishments, Madison and McFarland, Cottage Grove, and Fitchburg, have ever filed so much as a single ordinance violation citation against him. And that speaks volumes to his character, to his abilities as an operator, and his desire and ability to abide by your laws, rules, and regulations. Wherever he's been, he's done a splendid job of that. He's done a magnificent job of that. Having given you that background, we would like to have you hear from some persons who have known and who personally do business with Mr. Makovic. First, I would ask, and I don't know how we want to do this, that Mr. Charles Prestigiacomo present.
Yeah, they'll have to come to the microphone, identify themselves with name and address, please.
My name is Charles Prestigiacomo. I'm reside in Madison, Wisconsin at 350 South Hamilton Street, 53701, and I'm a retired businessman. And I want to tell you too that I have some ties with Oregon. We like Oregon. I lived in Fitchburg for 40 years on Whalen Road, and it was in the Oregon School District. And my kids went to Oregon, grade school, high school, graduated from there, and did exceedingly well. So we're kind of happy with Oregon. Charlie, you got some questions, right?
Well, I do, yes. Could you please tell us a little bit about your personal business background?
Okay. That's how I come to be here tonight, because really I'm an associate of Pat Makovic. I own the building in Fitchburg that is known as Liquor Town Building, and Pat is the operator there and has been for since last year. And we've had a wonderful relationship. It's been great. And talk about vetting. God, it was in our business, it's easy to vet. You get on the phone and you call all the wholesalers and the salesmen, and I did all those things before I entered into contract with him. And sterling, absolutely sterling reports. And I don't know why you people can't do that too. I mean, you can get on the phone and vet some of these things real easy. I mean, half a dozen phone calls would tell you the whole story. I also, this man has got a license in Madison, McFarland, Cottage Grove, Fitchburg. They're all happy, and I'm sure Oregon would be happy too. Believe me, I know it. So,
Do you have any personal experience in the liquor store business?
I was at Liquor Town myself for 27 years. I built the building up, and along with that, my wife and I had the Stop and Shop grocery store on State Street in Madison, Wisconsin, where we sold beer for many, many years, and no problems. And for my own record, you can call the police chief in Fitchburg, Tom Blotter, and ask about me, and he'll tell you that we tell it like it is. And you people, I'm sure, would be happy to have Pat in your midst, I tell you, for sure.
What is your opinion, based on your dealings with Pat, about his honesty and truthfulness?
Oh, it's been wonderful, sterling. I mean, no problems. I remember when we initiated the lease, and his lawyer at that time was picking around quite this and that and the other thing, and Pat says, "Oh, forget it." He says, my wife and I were together, and he knew right away that he was going to have a good situation with us, and I felt the same way about him. And it's been great. I tell you, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't great. I'm 87 years old, and been around the block a few times, and I know this is a good man.
The chief has alleged that there were 2 violations over 65 years of operating liquor stores collectively, as far as sale to a minor. One of your stores was in Madison, correct?
Exactly, for 35 years.
What is your opinion about a liquor store owner-operator who has had just 2 violations in 65 years of operation?
Well, I think that's a sterling record. God, I mean, put it on a percentage basis. I mean, you do business every day, 7 days a week, for years and years and years. It almost doesn't compute, does it? I don't think it does.
Would you say that that's the sign of a pretty conscientious operator?
Absolutely, yes.
Before leasing your store to Pat, what did you do to check him out?
I said that. That's the easiest. That's one nice thing about our job. You get on the phone and you call Frank Liquor, you call General Beverage, you call Phillips Distributing, and you talk to the managers, the owners, the salespeople, and all perfect.
Based on your interviews of people involved in the industry, what was Pat's reputation in the industry?
Oh, top shelf.
And one last question. Are you aware of Pat ever drinking alcohol?
He hasn't had a drink in 42 years. Okay. He's a non-drinker.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Prestigiacomo.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Prestigiacomo.
Okay, thank you.
Was one of your sons named Chuck?
Yes.
Yeah. I was assistant principal AD at the high school when he was there, so tell him I said hi.
Yeah.
I've been around a while, too. Not as long as you, but...
They did good. My son has been with TaylorMade Golf for 32 years. He's an executive vice president. So
I'm not surprised.
Oregon did good.
You got taught well.
We'd also like to have Nathaniel Romick address you.
Is it possible to have these go about 3 minutes?
Sure.
That's kind of our guideline if we
Oh,
can.
sorry.
Not every minute, but
I will.
there's a guideline.
Okay.
So you'll need to give us your name and address, please.
Nathaniel Romick, 1525 Kenilworth Court, Apartment 3, Stoughton, Wisconsin, 53589.
All right, Mr. Romick, what is your occupation?
I manage McFarland Liquor for Pat.
That's the gentleman seated to my left.
Indeed.
How long have you done that?
I've managed for 2 years, and I've been working for him for just past 3 years now.
Have you gotten to know him and his attitude toward the operations of his business well?
Absolutely.
All right, and how would you characterize him as a boss and a liquor license operator?
He's hands down the best person I've ever worked for. I have learned so much from him. He's been a fantastic mentor for me. I got the job relatively young after having worked kind of odd jobs here and there, and I have learned so much about business and how to deal with people and everything through Pat.
Could you characterize or tell us what you think of his personal character?
It's excellent. I've watched him deal with countless reps and customers and salespeople and people just walking in off the street looking for people coming in looking for donations from the community, people coming in and trying to sell new things, and every interaction that I've ever seen him with has been stellar.
Would you characterize him as a generous person in terms of giving back to the community?
Absolutely. I'm frequently at the store when someone comes in and asks for a donation for a local event. I always give him a call straight away, and he always tells me exactly what to do for him, and it's always far more than I would have expected.
Do you consider the liquor store in McFarland to be an asset to the community?
Absolutely.
What sort of relationship has Mr. Makovic developed with the police department in McFarland?
Over the last several years, we've done lots of donations for different events that they've done. And everything I've ever heard, every interaction I've ever had with the local police department has been absolutely fantastic. And
Thank you. Unless, I don't know if you have questions to Mr. Romick or not?
Anybody have questions right now? Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
all right, thanks.
Thank you. Wade? Yeah, okay, Wade. Right, Wade, yeah. All right, Wade Woods would like to
Hi there.
address you.
Yeah, Wade Woods, 4683 Raven Way, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, 53527. I've probably known Pat the longest here. I'm actually a sales manager for Wisconsin Distributors, Budweiser. I actually oversee the whole town of Oregon, Cottage Grove, pretty much Dane County, all the surrounding communities. So I can speak to the Cottage Grove store a lot like this one. Had a tenant in it, ran it to the ground. Pat came in. It's one of my top 5 accounts I have. I oversee about 380 accounts in Dane County. So I feel I've looked at numbers in this town, and since Alpines went out, which I'm still chasing money from the old tenant, went and paid on that, but your guys' beer sales off premise is what I deal with, not your bars, just your off premise, are down. That store, Ted did have a good concept, couldn't pay his bills. Pat is probably one of the best in the industry that I know when it comes to highly allocated items that people, not every liquor store gets. You gotta pay for all year to buy certain items to get these highly allocated things. And when these things hit the market, people follow trucks around town all day. So, like I said, your guys, since the liquor store, your sales have went down, which makes me feel people are stopping in Madison on their way home to buy, because there's no store there at this point. Bills is picking up a little bit, I get that. But I think you guys are losing customers that live in this town right now without having a good operator like Pat McAvoy in that location that is there now. So that's kind of the brief of mine. Like I said, I've been knowing Pat for 13 and a half years now. He's taught me a lot. He has a great heart, and I agree, it's everyone makes mistakes in their lives, but if you guys want someone in this town that's gonna bring people to this town and to give back to the community, your man's sitting right there.
Okay, can I just ask you, I think, do you have an opinion as to Pat's generosity and reputation?
As far as generosity, I know for a fact, Pat's had employees that have come across financial problems here and there. He's, without a doubt, just whatever they needed. It's not a give them, but you pay it back. I have no doubt if I tonight called Pat, I'm way behind in bills, Pat, I'm just struggling, I need this and that, it'd be come to the store, what do you need? It's yours, wait. The guy has a heart of gold, so.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I take it you travel widely and talk to a lot of people in the industry?
Yes.
Right. Have you ever heard anyone in the retail liquor industry in your travels, have you ever heard a bad word about Pat?
Well, obviously I've sold to Pat. At times he can be a tough guy, he likes things done his way. But no, all of his reps, other business owners in this industry, all respect Pat. He knows what he's doing, and yes, he does a lot for the community. Speaking of Cottage Grove, I live in Cottage Grove. Speaking of Lars, the new police dog, I was part of that fundraising campaign too. And yes, Pat stepped up very nicely for that cause, and I am actually, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a thing called Reach a Child. It's a foundation where they create backpacks for first responders and fire department for little kids. You have a fire or an accident, when these first responders show up, they have backpacks. A year ago, I did a kickball tournament. Pat donated beer for a year for a silent auction, brought $500 to the campaign. They're using their first inaugural gala this weekend. We're doing the same thing. We expect this is a little higher end event. That donation from Pat's probably going to bring anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to that campaign. And I work closely with that. That's a great campaign, Reach a Child. If you guys haven't noticed it, look it up. It's a really good cause.
Okay. Thank you, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
Who else do we have David here? Sure. Right. Okay. We would also like to have Stacy Listo address. You.
Hi, Stacy Listo, live at 605 Oak Street in Cottage Grove.
Okay, and what's your current occupation?
General manager. I manage all 4 of Pat's stores currently.
And how did you start out working for Pat?
Actually, Pat, I put in an application, and Pat didn't even call me back. I called him, and he wouldn't acknowledge me. I finally seen him in the store one day and asked him for 5 minutes of his time. I told him, obviously, if you look at my record, I am an 8-time felon, and it's not good on the books. But if you look at me and talk to me for 5 minutes, he won't be disappointed. And he checked my references, and he called me back the next day and offered me a job at $8 an hour and said, I hope you can prove me wrong because your record doesn't look so good. And 6 years later, I'm managing the stores, making $46,000 a year. So to me, that's pretty damn good. I've changed my life around, and it wouldn't have been for Pat. So.
For Pat having given you the opportunity?
Absolutely.
Could you describe Pat's loyalty and what it's like to work for him?
Absolutely. Pat has done nothing but make me prove myself to myself, to make me be a better person. He took me to dinner about 6 months ago, me and my assistant manager Nathaniel, and told us that when he passes that he's leaving ownership to Nathaniel and I. I'm going to be 60% owner of Monumental Enterprises, and Nathaniel's gonna be 40% owner. Blew my mind. I mean, I'm just an employee, you know, and for somebody to tell me that and just to know that my life is set, I don't have to worry about ever having a job again. So, absolutely,
Could you characterize his loyalty to his employees?
absolutely. Any employee that has ever needed anything, Pat is always there. You need a ride to work, Pat will come from Middleton to Sun Prairie to pick up an employee who works downtown. Chelsea owed, one of my employees right now owed the back taxes, a couple $100. Pat gave her the money so she wouldn't keep getting the notices. So Pat gave her the money, paid her tax return, just took $50 out of each check till the money was paid back. He's lent me money on numerous occasions when I've been down and out, and without hesitation, he will give the shirt off his back.
With respect to his treatment of his employees, would you say he treats them in a fair and honest manner?
Absolutely. He can be hard on everybody, but if you're not coming to work, don't come to work. Because when I got cameras in my store and we watch them and there's someone sitting in a chair and there's work to be done, why are you sitting in a chair? But other than that, he absolutely treats his employees very, very well.
Would you say he treats them with respect and
All day long.
fairness?
Absolutely.
Have you, in your tenure, during the times you've worked for Pat and in the different stores, ever observed any sexual harassment by him of any other employees?
Never. Never, never, never. No.
Would you stand for it?
Absolutely not.
Would Pat stand for it?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Nothing further. Yes, sir. Right, and then Randy Simonson would like to address the board briefly.
My name is Randy Simonson. I live in Stoughton, 1957 Quam Point Road.
How are you employed, sir?
I work for Pat at Party Port Liquor in Madison.
Where is that located?
University Avenue, 2901 University Avenue.
How long have you worked for Pat?
I think it's 2.5 years now.
Can you describe how he's treated you as an employee during those 2.5 years?
Well, to be honest with you, when I first started, it was a little bit tough for me because he took it so seriously. He does not hire somebody and say, here's the cash register, go at it. The training we get, I'm blown away, sorry Chief, but I'm blown away by your employee manual description, because that is not true. All right, we go through proper training. I'm almost in tears, I'm so mad right now. And you guys are probably thinking that, of course, his employees are gonna come up and stick up for him. That's not who I am, I tell the truth, okay? He puts us through training, he makes us get our license. He's just a fantastic boss. And he makes us do the right thing. Sorry.
How would you say he treats his employees across the board?
Best boss I ever had.
What would the other employees' opinion be?
Exact same way. But you know what? They know where they stand. Just like Stacy said, you come in and do your job. He's great. If you catches you sitting down on the camera, and there's stuff to do, then he's going to say something. But he is a fantastic employer.
Do you have a practice regarding fake IDs? Do you ever encounter those in your business?
Absolutely, and I apologize to you guys because I wanted to bring them with. I have a stack down at Party Port of fake IDs that we have confiscated from people. I mean, we take that so seriously, and I can produce them anytime you want.
Okay. I don't know how we could do this, but we do have a photograph of that, if we could show that to the board.
Unfortunately, I forgot to bring them, so I had my employee just send me pictures of them. If you want to see, it's just a whole stack of them that we have, just stacks of them.
There's been
Just confiscated IDs.
Not a Party Port, no.
Wow.
We definitely try to do the right thing by, there are some fake IDs that get by everybody too. Hopefully not by us.
Right, thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Okay, I just want to speak to one other thing about the Madison Police coming down about the kegs. I'm sure you guys are business owners. And if somebody came in and asked for your name and phone number of somebody that came into your store, would you feel obligated to hand that out? I mean,
Do you have a list?
huh? No.
Do you have a list?
No. No.
Do you take deposits for
Huh?
kegs?
Do we take deposits? Of course we do.
How do you get the deposit back from them?
When they bring the keg back, that's it. It falls off their
You
card.
don't take a name or anything?
No. We take the name down for the reservation,
So you
and
have
then
a list?
when the deposit comes back, it falls right off.
So you
That's
have a
it.
list?
No, there's no
But you just
list.
said you had a name.
We take a reservation. Once they take it, once we get the deposit, it's gone. And then when they bring the kegs back,
They have to have their slip to get their money back for
right,
their deposit.
and then it gets thrown away. Okay? We do take reservations, but once they get it, it's gone. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Randy.
We believe the testimony you've heard shows Mr. Makovec's excellence, I guess for lack of any other word, as an operator. 65 years, 2 citations, plus 3 counting the cigarettes. His employees think the world of him. You've not heard any evidence of any law violations by him. He's in all these other jurisdictions and operating successfully and within the law. Having said that, he's certainly here. As I mentioned in my earlier memo, he sometimes has difficulty with his speech, but he's more than happy to answer any questions that any of you may have of him personally.
Okay, thank you. Guess I have one quick one. Pat, did you prepare the employee manual?
I what?
Did you prepare the employee manual?
I participated in it, yes.
Okay, and is that the one you're currently using?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So, other questions, comments?
I do have some more comments if I can
You bet.
jump in whenever you want, so.
Are these comments or are these questions for the applicant?
No, these are comments.
Can I just ask one more follow-up
Yeah.
question about the employee manual? You heard the chief reference the village's ordinance that requires an applicant to demonstrate that it has an adopted policy regarding responsible alcohol sales and service. I don't know if you caught that, but we do have in our ordinance such a requirement. And I guess my assumption was that your employee manual was included in your application, perhaps responsive to that, perhaps not. But did you submit anything with your application that you intended to address that requirement, that you have a policy relating to responsible alcohol sales and service?
Okay,
Well,
excuse me, you'll need to come to a microphone.
If this is what you're talking about, we are required to take a class, all the employees online, an alcohol safety class and serving class, alcohol serving beverage class. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is there any written policy that your company has in that regard that you either did submit or that you submitted as part of your application, or?
Well, when I hire an employee, we give them the information on what website to go to, which I always recommend serverlicense.com, because there's a discount code where it costs my employee $12. I explain that the first day they start, I go through that employee manual. It is their obligation to take that course immediately before they start. They have 3 to 5 days of training, depending on if they have retail experience and how quick they adapt to what we do. But they pay for that license application or the online course, and then we pay for all the license fees. So.
Okay, so I guess I got a lot of people trying to answer the question, but what I'm hearing is there isn't a written policy per se, but what you describe is your practice.
If the license is granted, we'd be happy to write a policy.
It's in the employee manual, is it not, that the operator's license, that you have to take the course? It is, I don't have it with me, and I should have brought it. But it's under the operator's fees and have it in here.
Okay, I do see a requirement that all employees must have an operator license, and that you have to take the course. So that's what you're referring to?
Yes, yes, so, and then if sometimes an employee comes in and they already have a license, but then if it's not a license for that municipality, obviously, we gotta get them licensed for that. And absolutely, and we pay their license fees, but they have to at least obviously take the course and have the certificate to get a license. And that is and maybe it's not in here, maybe I would redo this and get that in here to where, that's what it states, but when it says all employees must have an operator's license to sell alcohol. So you must first complete the online course. Right, it is in there. Each city has a different operator's
So this
license.
section, operator license and fees and procedures, that's what you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And again, I would add, if the village deems that in any way as inadequate, although we believe it does address the issue, we would certainly entertain a conditional amendment.
And then can I just say one other thing about what the chief had said about I don't understand where you said it says to wear revealing clothes, and this, can you tell me where that says that?
What do you mean?
You said in there
I took that from a police report from what somebody said. I didn't say it was in a policy.
Okay, well, it says right in here how to dress, what my dress policy is, and there would never be revealing clothes ever allowed in any one of my stores. So that would never be acceptable. I don't even let them wear Coley jeans. I mean, that's no.
I think it's important for the people that are here, for those people that are listening on cable, and for the board members, to realize that I have no interest in no vested interest in this. My job is to conduct a background investigation on the applicants. And when I do that background investigation, I then report that information back to the board. And that's what I'm doing, okay? So when you say that he's 62 years and he only has 2 violations, the reason I brought that up is because Ms. Listle said there were no violations other than the tobacco violation, correct?
My tobacco violation, and it's not even the store. The store didn't get any of that violation.
But that's my point. You said there were no other violations, so I found 2 violations while doing a background check. That's why I brought that up.
me speaking where I was misinformed. So, and I'm sorry, I apologize for that.
But I'm just saying, that's why I brought that up. And
I was
also,
misinformed about those.
yeah, and also to the fact that he's only had 2 violations, I'd like the board to also understand that I checked with the jurisdictions. They don't do regular alcohol compliance checks. The ones that were caught were done by the Dane County Sheriff's Office doing their multi-jurisdictional task force, not from the municipalities themselves. They don't do, like we do, they don't do routine compliance checks. So I think that board needs to consider that as well. And I think that it's important for, I forget your last name, Charles, but that you talked about words such as false and defamatory and hearsay allegations. Again, I took that information from the police reports themselves. So I think it's important for the board to understand that that's where that information is coming from, okay?
I appreciate that, but I would emphasize that, for example, one of those witnesses admitted to lying to the police.
After she talked to you,
No, no.
to your attorney, correct?
No.
Okay, well,
I never spoke to that one. But,
it doesn't matter.
I think what's important is, I think if you check with other departments, Mr. Makovic is certainly willing and eager to work and cooperate with you.
And that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic. But again, I'm reporting back to the board on what I find. And so when I talk about reporting back what I find, in your brief that you gave to us today, you talk about the fact that Mr. Makovic, you said regarding the Madison Police Department inquiries regarding the keg distributions is completely unjustified. You said Patrick returned a call to the Madison officer and left his name and phone number and never received a call back. That's not true, okay? If you go to the report, it says that on 4/28, the officer went to Party Port looking for that information that had to do with kegs, okay? On 4/29, after the officer went there, he asked for Mr. Makovic's information and tried to call him, but did not receive an answer. He then left his department-issued business card with the male who was working and asked that he or Mr. Makovic call him back when they had decided that they wanted to cooperate with the police. The next day, he checked his messages on his phone, off his phone, and also checked for missed calls on his department-issued cell phone and didn't find any. So he went back to the store at about 8 o'clock. At approximately 8:30, I drove by Party Port, it says, and made contact with their employee, later identified as Mitchell Hurl. Explained to Hurl why he was there. Hurl and another employee both told me that they were told by Makovic not to give the police their keg list. Again, he explained to the employees why they were there, looking for that information, and he also said that due to the fact that they had a liquor license for the business, they were to give police access to all their books and records. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what the officer said. So he told, Earl told me that he understood and was told not to give the police the keg list. In the report, it goes on to say that he tried to call Makovic multiple times, did not answer, then he left a message. So he went back out to continue his shift, and approximately 9:30, he was contacted by his sergeant and informed that Makovic had called and had wanted to talk to him, so he called him back. He said he had an extremely hard time understanding what Makovic was saying on the phone, but he understood that he did not want to give the police access to the books. That's the information I'm talking about as far as cooperating with the police or not cooperating with the police.
I understand that, but number one, that contains a blatantly false misrepresentation by that police officer.
Based on what?
Well, there is no law that requires a liquor store to make all of their records available. That's just a false statement. That's why we have search warrant requirements in our country. This is a democracy. Citizens don't have to carte blanche turn over anything and everything.
But we're talking about cooperating with the police, right?
Now, Mr. Makovic did not have and does not maintain the information. And again, I would ask if you would check with the other jurisdictions where he's had licenses, and I'm sure you have. And we don't hear a negative thing from any police agency about Mr. Makovic's operations. We also, I do have two things regarding his donations to a Grace Hospice Care and another charitable organization he supported for American Family Children's Hospital. I don't know how you'd like to do this to make
Yeah, why don't you start them right there, then pass them right around.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's admirable that Mr. Makovic donates to charities and to police departments. I think that's great, but I don't know if that's relevant to issuing a license or not issuing a license, quite honestly.
Okay, well, all I can say, sir, is I would hate to see, well,
Let me help with this. I think we're gonna be pretty broad in what we're gonna hear. So I think it's fine for you to present that information. We're gonna hear it. We're gonna consider everything. Okay.
Okay.
So I want to make it clear that given that Mr. Makovic's character and reputation and record have been called into question, we're going to be pretty broad in what we're going to be listening to, and so we're happy to hear that. Are you guys done with your presentation?
I think in terms of witnesses, I would just say, I'm sorry to, I don't want to see the well poisoned, because Mr. Makovic's enjoyed an excellent business reputation in all of the other communities he's been involved in. And if the board sees fit to grant his license application, he would give the same unfettered cooperation to Chief Fuel if he's given the privilege of operating in this community. That's his intent, that's his goal, that's what he's generally tried to do in all the other places he's been in business for 65-plus years. Thank you.
Just one other thing, just for record keeping. So you mentioned you did email today a letter and materials. I think you have it. You've had it. You did refer to it earlier. So did the clerk? Did you get one of those? Mike, do you know? I guess what I want to do is I want to make sure that the letter you submitted with the exhibits that you emailed to board members today, I think what we should do is just make sure the clerk receives a copy of that, and you've got it? Okay, so I don't know that all of the trustees even had a chance to see that today, because it did come out today, but just for your information, if you're wondering what it is, Mr. Geeson did email today a letter and some exhibits, and he was referring to the letter earlier. So we'll make sure that the clerk has a copy of that in the clerk's file. You all received a copy by email.
Have any of you seen that? It came this
No, I
early
haven't.
afternoon, right?
Correct.
I mean, I ran into it only because I was talking to Mr. Dragney, and he said the letter had just come, so I looked, otherwise I would have missed it time-wise. So we have not, I mean, I read that because I had time. Some of the attachments were hard to read because of the background, like I said, but I can see where that happened with what's there, but I don't think anybody else has had a chance to read that yet.
But what I can say is, having read it, I believe Mr. Geeson covered everything in his letter in his presentation tonight. Would you agree with that?
Most of it, I tried to hit on the high points, but the counsel for the lessors is also here and would like to address the board if he could.
Okay.
My name is Josh Tagetz. I'm with the law firm of Reinhardt, Berner, Van Dieren in Madison. We're located at 22 East Mifflin, Suite 600 in Madison. I'll be brief. I think I would defer to much of the presentation that's already been made here today. But we represent the landowners at the facility where the license is being applied for. The landowners are Gary and Kathy Suter of Suter Investments, and they thought that it was important for me to be here today for just a couple reasons. First and foremost, and I think this is the most important point, the Suters, my clients, have done their own due diligence. As you can imagine, it's very important to them to have tenants at the facility that not only are good tenants from an economic standpoint, but also tenants that are going to comply with local laws. The Suters have a good record. They have never had problems with the law. They've never had problems paying taxes. They've been involved in the community, and they certainly feel very comfortable and confident moving forward with the Makovics, as evidenced by the fact that there is a lease in place at this time. The lease is contingent on the Makovics receiving the approval of the license. And so there are also economic considerations that are at stake. I think not only for the Makovics, but also for the Suters and the village. It is obviously important to the Suters, but also to the village that this property not remain vacant for a long period of time. Of the individuals that did have interest in the property, though, the Suters felt most comfortable and most confident moving forward with the Makovics, given the background checks that they did and given their investigation. So again, we hope that this matter can be resolved, that not only will you give consideration to the Suters and their comfort and confidence in the Makovics as tenants, actually having them come and be tenants at their property, but that you'd also give consideration to the economic considerations here, both for the landowners, for the Makovics, and also for the Village of Oregon.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, that's
okay. Chief, anything else from you?
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm going to suggest and request a 5-minute break. because then we're going to have to come back, and then the board is going to have to discuss the issues and decide whether you want to work through those tonight, whether you need more time to read the letter, how you want to proceed. And if you want to proceed tonight, we're going to have to work our way through it, and it's going to take a little work to get through it.
Okay. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Before that, I would like to thank the folks who came. You've given up some time tonight, and we appreciate you doing that and taking part in this. It's a complex issue, obviously, lots of things to consider, and that's what the board will have to do. So we will take a 5-minute break. Okay, folks, if we could all take our seat, we'll get started again. And I think we need Mr. Geeson.
I think Matt's talking to him.
Yeah, I think he's being tracked down.
If that's the only one I had checked, see, I locked my car. I think I did, but then I thought I left water in there, and I didn't. So I had to go. I'll be right down.
Okay, thank you. Does that work? Okay.
That works?
Okay. Okay, so here's my proposal for the board to consider, that we would meet, we don't have a meeting next Monday, we would have a special meeting at 5 PM. This would be the only thing on the agenda. It would include both applicants for the license, depending upon where things go. We would have to be done by 6:30 because legal counsel has to leave at 6:30. So, and we would take no more presentations, like we did tonight. I think we've had those. That's also considered, given the fact that the board has not had a chance to read that letter. I know you went through that quite thoroughly. I did read it, and I think you hit everything I could remember. But I think it's good to read that. That helps us formulate questions. When I said no more presentations, that does not mean the two of you won't sit at that table to answer our questions, but we won't do more of the presentation type thing. We've had a fair amount of those, and I think they were well done and thorough, so I think we're there on that. So how does that sound, Mr. Makovec and Mr. Geeson?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll work with that.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So does that work for trustees next Monday?
Yep.
Yep. Jeff?
Yep.
Everybody? Okay, yeah, we're all set.
At 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah, 5 o'clock, and we'll be done by 6:30.
Thanks.
So we have to make a decision on Monday night. We're not going to assault legal counsel.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. Okay, so that means item 3D is, whoops, I'm sorry. 3E is postponed also. That takes us to 3F, Sleep Inn of Oregon LLC, report regarding status and possible action regarding tax increment grant agreement.
So we're providing the board with some disappointing news on the hotel. Barb, one of the main contributors to the project, informed me last week that she was not going to be part of the project. So it was based on Matt's opinion that Steve should send this letter to Barb.
Yeah, so where we are is the board approved the agreement, authorized entering into the agreement. We signed it, we sent it to them. They never signed it and sent it back. So Barb talked to Mike and said she doesn't want to move forward with the project anymore, but I think that we should clarify, confirm that that no one's moving forward, that agreement's null and void. I don't like to have it just sitting out there with some uncertainty about whether or not they might change their mind yet again and sign the agreement and send it back to us 2 weeks from now. So I'd like to get confirmation from them that, yes, they're not moving forward and the agreement's null and void.
That makes sense. Okay, so again, disappointing news, as you can tell by looking at our chamber director.
So I did get a call from Eric Lund today. They are taking what we have proposed, and he is giving it to other potential investors. So I should maybe have an update for the board at the October 3rd board meeting.
Yeah, when Mike told me this, he mentioned that, we're hopeful another hotel developer will now come on board. Some of the legwork has been done on that area, so we'll hope that happens, comes back to us.
I mean, one thing that Barb said, she said it's a good deal from the village. She thinks somebody will take it.
Yeah, okay, good. We'll hope that happens. Okay, so.
Did she have a reason to back out?
She decided not to do the deal. I'll just say that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna go to item 8, things that we need to deal with
we
while
got
Mr. Dragney is here.
Steve, is it, Matt, do you want to have a vote on that? Have Steve sign the letter, or you did give me?
Yeah, could the board just
Okay.
authorize us to send that letter to Sleep In of Oregon LLC,
Okay,
please?
I'm
Because
sorry.
we're
I missed
revoking,
the
yeah.
possible action.
Yes.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, so motion second to send the letter to get confirmation as to what's happening. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, so now we get.
No, that's good, I missed the wording, the verbiage here. So item 8 is communication miscellaneous business. Item A, discussion of former trustee Eric Poole resigning from village board and possible board action. Eric's term expires April 2017. So Matt, do you have information for us?
Mike, did we get that
So I can,
resignation?
yeah, so we prepared a short letter to Eric because Matt has determined that by state law, Eric actually has to provide that letter to the village board. So I sent it to him Friday.
Okay.
So we're waiting for it.
Yeah, okay.
So until he actually submits his resignation to the board in writing, it's not
Official.
official, it's not a resignation.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to wait until you get that before you talk about next steps. I could give you a preview, if you want, of what next steps look like once there is a vacancy. Do you want to hear that?
Yeah, I would like to.
Okay.
Might as well get that now, kind of know where we're headed, so.
Okay, so his term would be up in April of 2017, correct? So the board will have essentially two options. You can simply leave the seat vacant until the spring election, and then people can run for office and fill the seat that way. Or the board could appoint someone to fill that vacancy just for the remainder of the term. So both are viable options for the board to consider. Once you've decided what direction you want to go, if you decide you do want to try and fill the vacancy, then the procedure you use is really up to you. There are a lot of different ways you can approach it, but it's your call as to how you would go about doing that. Ultimately, it would be a vote of the village board required to, a majority vote of the board would be required to appoint someone to fill that vacancy.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Matt? The last time we had a vacancy, we had a short application. Several people applied. We did interviews right here on TV in this room for that, and then voted on the person to fill out that term. This term is much shorter than what that term was. That was for a full almost 2 years. So this is much shorter, so time will come pretty short. But we are hopeful that Eric will get that back to us promptly, and then we can decide how we want to do that. Okay. So no action tonight, right?
None tonight.
Okay. Item B, under 8, discussion possible action, Stafford Rosenbaum, 2017 for their fees, which I believe, if I remember correctly, they are remaining the same.
That's correct. No change for 2017.
So we would need a motion to bring that before us.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mike, what's your recommendation?
Approve it. We like when rates don't go up.
Yeah.
Do we have a price? How much is it?
Yeah, it was in our packet.
We have a schedule where the hourly rates varies depending on two things. Partners are at one rate, associates at another rate, and then paralegals are at a third rate. So that's one way that the rates are characterized. The other way is we charge a different rate for general municipal services, which frankly is most of what I do. So tonight, for example, that would be general municipal services. Prosecution work, which we actually don't really do that for the Village of Oregon, but we have a different rate that we charge for that. Labor and employment related services, we do a little, not a lot. Kyle Gulia does probably more of that for you guys now, so that would be, again, not really applicable for you guys for the most part. Land use and development, we have a rate that we use for that type of work. And then other work such as litigation or environmental services, we handle that on a case-by-case basis. So if we were to represent the village in litigation, we'd have to discuss that at the time, what the rate would be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? So give a motion second to approve the Stafford Rosenbaum fees for 2017, which are staying the same as 2016. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item C, discussion possible action, resolution number 16-28. Recommended motion approve the resolution authorizing emergency action regarding the culvert crossing South Burr Oak at Bethel Greenacre Park.
So I'll make the motion for discussion.
This is Jeff's issue.
Yeah, well, this is more just a legal matter as far as.
Steve, we need a second, Steve.
We need a second, Jim, sir.
I'll second.
Doug, second.
Sorry.
It's a mix of legal and
It's a mix
public
of
works.
legal and engineering here, because what we have is that we discussed last week the award of the contract to Iowa Grant Trucking to fix the culvert, but we do want to make sure that we did go out to two entities for prices, but just to kind of clean it up from a legal standpoint, we want to make sure that it goes through an emergency action. And Matt, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the village normally has to follow the public bidding law to contract for public improvement work. There is an exception for that where in the language of the statute, there's an emergency that requires acting quickly to protect public health and safety, I believe is the public health and safety, yeah. And so this resolution, if the board adopts it, declares an emergency for purposes of fixing this culvert at this location. I have discussed the circumstances with Jeff, and he has described those in a way that I've built into this resolution that I believe is qualifying, but it's ultimately the board's determination as to whether this is a circumstance that justifies declaring an emergency for purposes of not publicly bidding the contract.
So what I'm hearing you say is, in certain instances, time is of the essence, and going through the normal bid process unnecessarily puts people's health and welfare at risk.
That's correct, and in this case, it's really the road that's the concern.
Yeah.
And Jeff can speak to this better than I can, but there is a concern about what's happening and how that could impact the road.
Sure, yeah, and we talked about that during last week, but if we were to receive a very large amount of rain, I don't think anything happened today, but North or South Burr Oak is quite a thoroughfare for our community, and we want to be able to make that, keep that open. It's actually undermining right now where we have barricades, and it'll just continue to do that further until we repair it.
And every time there's an emergency or a sense of an emergency, would a resolution like this come before the board? Or does signing this resolution give Jeff the ability to declare an emergency and make the decision on his own?
No, the board is declaring the emergency. This is
It's strictly for this.
specific to this project.
Exactly.
In order for any other emergency to be declared allowing this process, it would have to come back to the board. The board has done this a couple of other times. The railroad bridge was an example, and I think there was one other, but I can't remember.
But also, it's the cost of the project too.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have a project that we can fix for $3,000.
Oh, that's a completely separate
Right,
issue, yeah.
right.
If the cost of the project is low enough, we don't have to worry. It's not a public bidding issue. This one is, it exceeds the $25,000 threshold.
Exceeds the $25,000 threshold, but, and
So you either have to publicly bid this, which would take more time.
and money.
Yeah, well, that's not really relevant
I know,
to this
but-
issue. So you have to decide, is this a circumstance where getting the culvert fixed and getting the repair in place to avoid potential collapse of the roadway justifies speeding along, not publicly bidding, using the negotiated contract process that's been used here? I think that Jeff is ready to have a contract signed almost immediately after this approval,
Correct.
if the board approves it.
Jerry?
Did I hear you correctly, Jeff? $25,000 is
More
the
than-
cost?
So it's 44.5, I think.
Yeah.
No, it's 44,000. And we actually received,
Pretty close, Steve.
actually, I went out and I asked for prices from two individuals. One was Iowa Grant Trucking, that's the outfit that is currently doing work within the village, and we figured that that would be a good person to use because they are here, they have all their equipment here. And then another individual is Bill Fox Construction with Fox Construction, and Fox Construction is an outfit we use commonly for helping us to do larger repairs to our water system mains and everything like that. And the prices that we found, we actually recommended the cheaper of the two for the concrete pipe. The other option from Bill Fox was $49,600 for the concrete pipe option, and for the Iowa grant trucking was $44,000, which is what we requested and what the board reviewed last week.
So how will we pay for this? Out of,
Go ahead.
So Jerry, we're gonna pay out of, for the street work, we're gonna pay out of Street Improvements Fund 405.
okay,
2016 borrowing, and we saved some money for the project we did at the high school. And then the balance will come out of Developer Stormwater Fund, which we collect fees from developers, and we'll pay it out of that fund as well.
sounds like a good plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion second to approve resolution number 16-28 for repair of the culvert at South Bear Oak at Bethel Greenacre Park. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
I think you're welcome, Jeff. We have one more, I think.
One more, and then
for
Matt can
Jay.
take off, yeah.
Okay, so AJ, discussion of possible action, review of Pelletari's contract extension proposal for 2017 to 2022. Our current contract expires in 2017. The recommended motion, direct staff to provide a new 2017 to 2020 contract with Pelletary for the board's consideration without the letter of credit requirement.
So moved. Second. So can you tell me, when we did the contract originally and required the letter of credit, why did the village require a letter of credit?
They were new to the business. We were one of their really new customers, and the board was a little nervous that if something happened, we would have something to fall back on.
And can you give me like a for example? Like, for example, when would you activate the letter of credit with a
If
contract?
they informed the village that they were going out of business, and we had to find somebody else in a hurry. But they've been a fabulous company to deal with, so I'm not worried about it at all. And I did talk, that's why Matt's here, I wanted to get, in case somebody has a question about the letter of credit. I don't see the need for it anymore.
I don't either. And I know they're not only providing service here, but they're,
Expanded.
they are serving one of my other clients, the village of Short Hills, which, if you've ever been there, it's not an easy village to pick up garbage in. I mean, I don't even know how they drive their trucks through that village, and they get good reviews for the work they do there, too.
And as I recall, the container system was new at that time.
Yes.
Too. So we're starting a new system of garbage.
That's true, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We get an exceptionally low amount of complaints, and if there are any issues that do arise, the Pelletary has responded extremely quickly and also taken care of it, sometimes on their own time and everything. It's been a good contract for us.
Yeah, and I've had real good feedback from residents about the good job they do. And
As
what
have
they
I.
often comment, some stuff flew out, they got out of the truck and picked it up.
Yeah.
In terms of just
I've seen
what
it.
they do, people like it. So,
Yeah, and I've seen the drivers stop when, people mound stuff outside the container sometimes. You're not supposed to, but I've seen them stop and pick it up.
There was a
Sorry, Doug,
I
go
have a
ahead.
question. There's a note on their proposal that says, "We would welcome the opportunity to discuss eliminating or reducing the current performance bond requirement."
That's the letter of credit.
That's the same thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, any further questions? So we have a motion second to provide a new 2017 to 2020. Is that supposed to be 2020? Did I miss something there? It says 2022 in the line ahead.
It's 22.
Oh, that's a typo.
And just so you know, you're not actually
Yeah,
voting
I
on a
get you.
contract tonight. You're just authorizing the preparation of a contract to come back to you for your review.
Okay.
I think probably in line with the proposal.
Yeah.
It is 2022, sorry about
Okay.
that.
And that's without the letter of credit requirements. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks,
Matt, done for tonight?
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay, so under item 3, public appearances, item E is off the table tonight until next Monday. And item F is done, so that takes us to item G. Continuing discussion with board members and village residents regarding the village possibly acquiring the former Methodist Church property at 249 and 267 Main Street for a municipal building site. Item 1, board questions and issues. Item 2, public input. Item 3, possible board action. The options are to direct staff to inform the property owners the village is not interested in pursuing that property, or to direct staff to begin negotiating with property owners to possibly acquire the property, or table the item for further discussion at the October 3rd meeting. So item G is before us. So item 1 is board questions and issues. And Mr. Slavny and Jackie's still here too, huh?
And then, see, there was that other memo that, oh, I see it gone now. It was on the table. We talked about.
Yeah. So how do you want to start?
I think maybe let Mike kind of go.
Okay, yeah.
If you don't mind.
We had an opportunity to provide a more thorough diagram of how a building with the footprint for the senior center at 1 story or the library at 2 stories could fit on the old Methodist Church property. You can see that up here. It fits nicely.
Thank you.
The layout would be east to west on the southern part of the site. We would be able to exceed, almost double the building setbacks over the requirements of the zoning in that area. We can provide adequate parking, particularly for the senior center, but even for the library. Without a traffic study, I would tentatively say that recommending a right-in, right-out on North Main Street and a full access to the north on Johnson Street would be one way the traffic flow could work without causing traffic backups. There would be enough room on the northern part of the site for stormwater facilities that could provide relief for other properties, residential properties in that area. There's enough room on the site for modest building expansion for long-run locations at that site, with the additional ability to provide room for expanded parking or a good-sized area for outdoor activities associated with either use. So I think an initial question that you had was, will either of these facilities fit? I think we can confidently say they would. Again, we'd want to do soil tests on the property, but the old Dane County Soil Atlas from 1961 shows that this has, at least theoretically, some of the best soils in all of Oregon to put a large building. It was the original high point of the village, and the soils that it has on the site are called Dodge, and Dodge is one of the best soils we have in this part of the county. It's a soil that's well drained for the most part. And as you go north on this site, it isn't Dodge anymore, and that probably explains the ponding that we get at various times of the year, probably earlier this evening on the north part of the site. But without doing the soil borings, the more general soil information looks promising on this site.
So I had a question, and I'm going to ask it in 2 parts. The question is, what is the cost of taking this piece of property off of the tax rolls to the taxpayer? And in that question, I think about the annual expense of not having the property on the tax rolls anymore, and I think about the upfront expense of having to borrow. The second part of my question, though, is how long was this property operated as a nonprofit, and was it paying taxes to the village at that time? So is it relatively recently that this has been a tax-generating parcel, or was it a tax-generating parcel for?
When it was a church, it was nonprofit, so it was.
Probably the last 10 years is.
Yeah, it's like 150 years for the church, I think.
Yeah,
I think
Was it maybe early 2000, let's see, Jerry Lupe was in office when we were talking.
2004.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
So almost 12 years.
I know that.
I'm guessing Steve knows the answer.
Oh, Marshall told me.
Oh, Marshall told. And your, I didn't bring my file down. I think it's the taxes for this year total for school district or anything. I think it was $13,000 off the top of my head.
$13,710.58.
Man alive, Steve. Thank you.
Anything else you want to know?
Yeah. And I think so about 25% of that is the village.
Yeah, so the total for the village is $3,949.50. That's the note Mr. Grace gave me. Don't be too impressed.
And what do you think the upfront cost would be? And I know that we have to know what the purchase price is and who knows what that is, but if we just threw a number out there, like what the assessed value is plus a little bit.
You mean if something was built on there?
Say the cost to borrow $800,000 to the village residents.
I don't want to, I couldn't guess, Jeff. Sorry. Oh, you mean, I'm sorry, so you're saying you're trying to figure out what it would cost to buy the property. You're talking about the debt service, or just buying the property?
Right.
Yeah.
Just the debt service of buying the property, and say it was $800,000, and I'm not saying it is. I'm just trying to pick a number that we can use to.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if we just borrowed,
So 1.5% is the cost? Over the tax base?
what was the average? It was like around, wasn't it like 1.6, 1.5 interest rate, something like that.
Mike or Jackie, do we save much by building on that site as opposed to where the current buildings are, where the soils simply aren't good?
Where the current buildings are, the soils are, in terms of the general information we have, are adequate. The parking lot portions of the village property are among the worst soils in the village, and there are quite a bit of those soils around, and they tend to be the parklands and the natural areas in the village. So it may be that in terms of development, a parking lot is the highest and best use for the northern parts of that block. I think the main trade-off, the way that I would characterize it, is if we acquire the old Methodist Church property, or frankly any other off-site property, we're able to simplify the moves associated with shuffling the uses. For example, if the library went to the old Methodist Church property, the library would only have to move once, and the senior center would only have to move into the current library and then back into a new senior center on each site. And the same kind of sequencing would be true if the senior center went on the site. Whereas if we built on the current sites, the best site is the senior center site. We would have to find a temporary home for the senior center. We would take down the senior center building and construct either a 2 or 3 story building on that site, depending on how many uses you wanted to put in that building. If you wanted to put the library and the senior center in that site, we're looking at needing 3 stories. If we built the library on that site, we'd go for 2 stories. Then we would at some point take the current library site down. That might mean the senior center had to stay in its temporary location while we constructed the senior center at that site. So I think one clear difference is just the number of times our facilities would have to relocate. A second difference is expandability. The old Methodist Church site, simply because it provides a second site, provides more long-term expansion capabilities, both at that site and at the current site. And then a third distinction is how many floors do these facilities need to be? And I think in this instance, it may not be a difference in floors. I think at the current site, we would go with a 2-story library and then a 1-story senior center next door on the current library site. And if the library went to the old Methodist Church site, it would have to be a 2-story building to fit. And we would tear down the current senior center, and the senior center would be in the existing library, and then in the long run would move into a 1-story senior center. So there it's more complicated moves, but we end up with the same number of floors. And then finally, again, because it's another site, we would run out of parking if both facilities were on the current site. Maybe not in the short term, because the number of users would be comparable to what we have today. But in the end, we would have to rely, I think, significantly on off-street or on-street parking, and there's a lot of it in the area. Sometimes we get spoiled by expecting to find off-street parking, but I think we're used to parking in other communities where if you can find an on-street site, you're pretty happy about it. That would be a difference here. If we had 2 sites, we'd have adequate parking for a long time to come. If we stay on the existing site, there'd be an expectation that we would have to use on-street parking on a regular basis, particularly over time.
Question, Jerry?
Yes, Mike, am I understanding you correctly? It sounds as though it's financially more feasible to build in the current location.
Well, we don't have to acquire a property, and we
Right.
don't have to take down any buildings.
Right.
On a second site.
Or do a traffic study.
Correct.
Things like that. Because I know Jeff was alluding to the costs of acquiring the property, so we do have more than just the acquisition of the property. It's, as you said, a demo, traffic study, clearing the property, so, okay, thank you.
I just have one question too. If we stay down where we are, where the senior center and the library, could we also go across the street where we could close that one street beyond the library and maybe purchase those buildings too? That way they would stay where they are, but it's just another.
Right. I think that over the long haul, and these tend to be long-term buildings, opportunities would come up to acquire properties either on the same block or nearby that could serve either as additional parking areas or to provide more of that campus interconnection kind of feel.
Now, do we plan to put the, not the food pantry in there, or the youth center? Is the youth center going to be in there too?
Well, those facilities, in the rough analysis that we've done, there's room for those facilities on site, either on the current block or on the old Methodist Church site. We've got some room to work with on both sites for both the youth center and the food pantry. However, I know that the food pantry, is exploring other locations at this point in time.
Yeah, the food pantry is pretty well on the way to being on the Methodist Church property.
Right.
That's not done. There's still some things to get done, but it's
The
they're
new
in favor of it and working with the church district to get that done. So that's probably off the table as far as in this area. Plus, they prefer not to be downtown.
And I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily think that the least expensive answer is always the best answer. Personally, I try to balance quality with cost, and I am curious to know what the impact on the taxpayer would be. And not just the cost of the borrowing, which is a part of it, but, what would that equate to? Because I think I'm an average taxpayer, and it's a difference to me if my taxes go up by $2 or if they go up by $200. There's a difference there. And if they went up by $2, I think it would give me a better sense of the cost of this project, to me, and that would help me to understand a little better.
So Jeff, would you want just the acquisition costs or then getting the site prepared?
I kind of think all in, like Jerry said, I mean,
But
I
not-
think
but
we're
not-
gonna have some site work that has to happen no matter where we go, is my guess. So you're gonna have to do some kind of apples to apples equalizing.
But we won't have demo, which we will have on that property.
I see it this way. Under the old Methodist Church scenario, we'll have acquisition, cleanup, and site preparation at that site.
Okay.
That's an additional cost under both scenarios. On the current site, we won't have acquisition, but we'll have demolition and cleanup on those two, under both scenarios.
So do you think those two costs, those latter two, would be about the same for either site?
Yes.
Okay. And the buildings are somewhat comparable size-wise and what has to happen, and,
Correct.
yeah.
So we could have Jim Mann help us run that, so I just want to make sure, so are we looking for acquisition and site preparation, or?
Well, I think we could probably, if you say site preparation would be the same regardless of
So this-
whether,
yeah.
whatever we do, then I think we can probably take that off the table and just focus on the
Acquisition.
cost of acquisition, because we're gonna have to shoulder the cost of site preparation regardless of which way we go.
Well, at the old Methodist Church, though, it'll be acquisition, cleanup, and site preparation at that site.
So acquisition and cleanup are the two unique costs.
And site prep at that.
And at the existing location, we'll still have site prep.
I think at the existing location, the cost will be comparable under each scenario. The difference between the scenarios is what happens on the old Methodist Church property.
So then maybe include all three. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Okay, so, okay. So to get a good number, we're gonna have to talk to somebody else, obviously, to get, obviously clearing the property and everything.
I think Cliff
Yeah, I'll say that,
at the
yeah.
architecture
Yeah.
firm is
And I think what we'll end up doing, if it's okay with the board, is, as part of the acquisition, evaluation, is we have impact fees to use. And so I think I'll sit down with, Lisa, and, because, there's by November of 2017, we have to spend a certain, we have $222,000 of impact fees on the books for library.
I think that's
Something like that. Of that 222, there's a certain amount we have to spend by November of 2017, or we have to start refunding like we did, was it last year? So I think we'll just be safe, I'll go in and say, okay, we'll take that amount and apply it towards the acquisition, and then the balance would be the borrowing. Is that okay with the board as a exercise?
Well, I was gonna say, yes, if they stayed where they are, then we wouldn't have to purchase the church.
Right, but Jeff's asking me to do this evaluation. I want to make
Right,
sure, because we could have Jim Mann run it strictly, take this amount and run it out 15 years versus running it minus the impact fees. So I want to know what the board wants to do.
Yeah. As much information as we can get.
Okay.
I think for me anyway, conceptually, we've got the expressed interest of the residents, that they're in favor of the project. Nikki's weighed in. She feels like it's a good project, so I feel conceptually that it makes sense to me. But what I don't have is the cost difference, and that would affect how I would ultimately feel about it as a taxpayer.
Okay.
Other comments from trustees?
I hate to further complicate this issue, but are we certain that we don't have a property that the village already owns that would be suitable for one or the other building? I don't know if we need, possibly think about another study.
Well, so
'Cause there is a location in that downtown area that is a possibility, I think. I don't know, I'm not an expert.
So We looked at, maybe Mike, can you talk about the soil analysis? I mean, again, we're not doing soil testing, this is just Mike's looking at the historical.
This afternoon, I looked at the public open space running from the pool all the way over to Highway 14. And in terms of the general soil atlas, we have the collection of the soggy soils along the creek.
Oh, yeah.
And those extend throughout the park system.
Even into J.C. Park West?
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if here or there, when things are glaciated, it's like a blender. You can get little spots of things that normally wouldn't go there if we were in, say, Kentucky. But generally, these soil atlases are pretty good, and particularly the concerns with the soils we have in the parks isn't so much that they're going to flood. It's that they are flood deposits, so they're silts and clays, and buildings that are built on them, you can't put a big building on those kind of soils. You have to take them out and bring more granular things in. And even then, in the long run, you may get water in the lower levels. You're fighting gravity. Water wanting to go to the lowest available air pocket, which is the basement. Generally, my advice would be it would be a good idea to keep any kind of buildings that are large or buildings with basements out of those soils, whether they were a home or a village facility. So we have available, theoretically available property, but I think there's a reason that we don't have buildings on that those properties, weren't built on early in the village's history. There was better land to go on. So I think it's possible, but normally we'd recommend against something like that unless it was really the only option. Because the senior center and the library can fit on the current site, my recommendation would be to find a way to do it on the site rather than put one of those structures in an area that's going to have to undergo a whole lot of money to get the site ready because it's in iffy soils.
Other questions?
It's my understanding that there's some physical problems with the current library building itself.
The parking lot.
Not the building itself?
Well, I'm not aware of any fatal problems with the building itself in terms of its structural integrity. The architect, that's his bailiwick. But we've long heard that the parking lot for the library, going all the way up to the post office, was just soils that aren't really stable enough for a larger building or any kind of structure with a basement. The soils atlas shows that those better soils, where the current library is and where the current senior center is, that those are only a few hundred feet away from the really bad soils, but they're in a completely different soil category.
Don't all look at me.
And they can't go up 2 stories either, right, down there?
Well, not in the parking lot. We'd have to have borings to determine whether they could on the current site, but at least in terms of the general soil atlas, things look pretty good. And we can't completely trust it, though.
In terms of funding, isn't there some urgency to make some decisions as to where this library might be sited, given the impact fee return? Is that right?
I think the board should take the time to make the right decision if you feel comfortable. I mean, we already refunded impact fees. I don't think you should let that drive this. I just brought that up because I didn't want, when we do if we're gonna do this analysis, I don't want the board to be surprised about using or not using impact fees for the analysis. But to me, I would just put that on the side and look at it without even thinking about impact fees, Doug, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it drives the process, but if we can utilize them, that'd be good, but,
I mean,
this is a long-term decision.
When you're
so-
talking about spending $8 to $10 million on buildings versus worrying about $200,000 impact fees, it's not to discount it, but it's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the big picture long term.
I see your point.
Yeah.
Jeannie?
I was just gonna ask, in the analysis that you are gonna prepare, any developer that comes forward seems to want this magical number of $1 million of TIF money.
Yeah.
Is there any way to put that into the analysis of the cost that it would, because it costs us money to borrow $1 million? We just don't have it laying around. Can we have that in the analysis?
Mike and I, we've talked about that a little bit, yeah.
We had an interesting conversation. The site preparation and cleanup cost, in addition to acquisition, at the old Methodist Church is going to be roughly what people have been asking for in terms of TIF assistance.
Can we give ourselves a TIF?
Now the difference, that's been asked.
You gotta submit an application.
Yeah.
We aren't taxed, so whereas a private development on the old Methodist Church site would generate property taxes, and if it were in a TIF district, would generate TIF revenue, I think that if the library or the senior center went on that site, although the property itself wouldn't be taxable, I think that both a private project and a municipal project on that site over time would have a beneficial effect on property values in that whole block and probably across each of the streets around that block. An investment of $5 to $10 million, whether it's public or private money, is a very significant investment. And I can tell you in the other suburban communities in Dane County, when investments of that size were made for municipal facilities, it tends to have a rising tide effect in terms of stimulating private reinvestment in homes or redevelopment projects. It's a notably large, nice new building that has good public activity around it. So although it wouldn't have the financial benefits directly that a TIF district could generate, I think it would have a long-term beneficial effect on property tax revenues and property values in quite a large area around.
It would drive some reinvestment, is what you're saying?
Yes.
That was an interesting comment that you made. I didn't even think about that question, but I think Jerry was out for it. Can we just?
Actually, can I just say something for a second? I mean, I know you have a chance to read it, but actually, Mike and Jackie talk about that in this memo.
Okay.
When you go, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jeannie, but when you go through the pros and cons, they walk through the memo and they basically say that likely to improve property values and increase likelihood of private sector reinvestment in the surrounding area. That's one of the pros of going and acquiring the property.
So Jerry, I just brought up the fact that a developer seems to always request $1 million in TIF on that property, and instead of us borrowing money for that $1 million, we would just spend it on the site. So I was asking about that.
Good point.
That's not an offer, by the way.
No, of course not. Just a scenario.
Keep it on the lighter side here. I was at a meeting a few days ago and I heard a question asked that I really liked in terms of doing big things in a municipality. And it's, the question is, if you do this, what's it look like in 20 years? Or if you don't do it, what's it look like in 20 years? Which I think is kind of where Jeff is coming from too.
Yeah.
And it's important we look into this thoroughly and do it right. And get all the information we can to make that decision, I think, and then decide.
You know, and I've drawn this parallel before, and the more I think about it, the more true it is for me. You know, the end of the Great Depression was the beginning of the Works Progress Administration and investment in capital infrastructure for municipalities. You know, our schools were built in the 20s. This building was built in the 40s. So it's almost as if on the heels of this Great Recession, we're in that same economic place again, where municipalities have this opportunity to borrow money at incredibly low rates, and that's not always going to be the case. And if you don't take the long view, I think, on these infrastructure projects, you're either going to miss the turn altogether, or it's going to cost so much more to the village residents when you finally do decide to bite down on it. So I guess that's a little bit of a comment that doesn't really pertain specifically to this project, but in general, it kind of informs my view on these sorts of discussions relative to the village. This is a unique point in time that my grandparents saw and my grandchildren might never, hopefully.
Another factor for me is that I look at the library Fitchburg has and what happens there. You know, our library accomplishes a lot given the size and what it is and so on. And if we were in, and I'm not saying a building like Fitchburg's, but we can do a building that offers a lot more, which Nikki will be talking about a little bit, I think. That brings people together. It gets people out. It's healthy for a community. There's no financial probably impact to that, but I just think it's a healthy part of the well-being of a community and a neighborhood. And like the idea Mike talked about too, that you do a public or private building area like this, it has some impact and reinvestment in that neighborhood. So that's good. It's already good. It just gets better. Other questions, comments here, or?
No, I think we're probably back to the point that started here. Jeff had the comment about the financial aspect of doing that project. And I think before I make a decision on something like that, I'd like to see that, because as Steve alluded to, we need to proceed very carefully, because this is a huge investment and we don't want to cause hardship financially for people by creating this great new building. And I think I, for one, I want to wait a little bit until we get that financial information.
And going forward, you know, we have there's always the option of not doing the total building that we'd like to do and make it so we can add on to it too.
Right.
Time, so. Okay, Mike and Jake, anything else right now? If not, we bump to the next thing, which is any public input. The feedback I've gotten from a few people in that area is they like the idea of the village pursuing that property and putting a building there and possibly having some open space. That depends upon how all that planning goes and what happens. There'd be some water detention that would take place for some of the property. So it would clearly change, and it's going to be a good-sized building no matter what it is. But so I don't know if anybody wants to speak at the present time tonight. Mike? We'd like to go with about 3 minutes if we can. I think you're all used to that, so.
Oh, man, I'll never keep it there. No, I'll keep it there, don't worry. Hi, Mike Wunsch, 299 North Main Street. I want to speak strongly in favor of either the senior center or the library moving to the Methodist Church property. I'm one of the property owners in the area. My own preference is actually the library, although it's a bigger building. The Methodist Church is one of the few areas left in Oregon where you can do infill into green space. And I'm sort of a library junkie. I've been to many of the libraries that are in the area. And I go to libraries like Verona or Fitchburg that have surrounding green space, and they're a tremendous asset to the community. And having a library with community rooms and an outdoor area where events could overflow and people could go sit and read a book or contemplate things, I think is more than just a building. I think it becomes a centerpiece for a community and a draw for people for the quality of life in this community. Now, I look at, all the controversy we had over what the sanctuary project and the scale of that, having a library or, of this size is actually a good fit for our community. I agree with what Steve was talking about in terms of raising property values in the area. It's going to happen if you put something there. It's a tremendous asset to my community. It's an area where homeowners can send their kids. It's keeps a green space on that side of Main Street, of which there isn't really anything else there. And it's going to raise my property taxes, and I got to tell you, I'm totally okay with that because I think this will enhance Oregon. So, thank you much.
Thank you.
Is that 3 minutes?
You're 10 seconds over. I don't know. I wasn't watching.
Sarah Dewey, 266 North Main Street, and I think probably 2 points I want to make is I love the way things are going right now and the process that's everybody's taking with this. I'd like to see everybody just take their time as they can to kind of really think this through, and you're asking great questions. One thing that I have been thinking about since last week is my understanding is this is on high ground, and that it's possible that there could be a lower level, first floor and second floor. Yes? So what I would love to see is from both the library and the senior center, a listing of what these new buildings would include, what parts of the building would include, like community room, activity room, quiet room, computer room, that sort of thing. And then look at those two lists and see where there's common areas. Because maybe instead of two separate facilities with X amount of square footage that's enormous, maybe you could end up with some common space and make it fit into that square footage that everybody needs by combining those common areas. You wouldn't have to have all your bathrooms over here in the senior building because they're all going to use the bathrooms over here in this building. Maybe there's community meeting rooms that you could share. And like I said, computer rooms, quiet rooms, activity rooms, storage downstairs in that lower level. So I think if people were willing to just kind of take a minute, and maybe it sounds a little, outside the box, but maybe that's what we need to look at and entertain and brainstorm with these things. Because maybe overall, if we were able to do a project like that, combining both of them with shared space on that site, then you don't have the issue of two separate sites, two separate building projects, whatever. And then to get really outside the box, looking at the money, the current property owners of the Methodist Church really have expressed their interest in building senior housing, low-income housing, assisted living. What is the value of that property compared to the value of that property? Why don't you negotiate that into the package? They get this property over here. They can build their big buildings that they want to build with the assisted living, low-income housing, because that would all fit into that area very nicely. And that would bring down the cost of acquiring that property over there and doing this beautiful, wonderful thing that's going to benefit the community on so many different levels. So there's my 2 cents.
If we go to negotiating, we can look at that as a possibility.
Okay.
Swap your property.
So, yeah, swap it or discount that by what that is, whatever. So
Okay.
there are
Thank you.
my 2 cents. Thank you again for this. I'm very excited that everybody's working together on it and coming up with great questions and ideas, and hopefully we'll keep plugging forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
I recognize a hand in the back there, Susan.
Hi, my name's Megan Schutz, here kind of in threefold. I'm a resident of Oregon, 772 Foxfield. I also work for Gorman and Company up the road, who, number one, has an interest in real estate development, obviously, and also has an interest in being a neighbor of this site. And mostly just wanted to stop up and just mention just to advocate that we're not looking at these options kind of with tunnel vision in terms of what's the civic use only, and looking into terms of making sure that we're thinking about any potential mixed use approaches to help negate the financial impact on the village. I see that both on, my career side, but as a homeowner as well, I would hope that the village is looking for opportunities to make money on sites that they own. If you only use civic uses, you're not generating any income. So I would just advocate that whether Gorman specifically is involved, but in general, that apartments, retail, other uses are thought of in the big picture, so you don't kind of stonewall yourselves into a situation where it's too late as well. Also offering, we've met with folks before, Gary Gorman individually, and the company are available as resources for information, bounce ideas off of. We've done projects that incorporate civic uses and residential uses in other municipalities, and think it's a pretty good mix. And I actually think personally, as a resident, I'd like to see that in my community as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
Susan Shedevy, and I own property at 220 North Main Street in Oregon. And I do think the village needs to look long-term, because we keep hearing the village is going to grow, and I don't remember what the number was, but by 2020, we're supposed to be a lot bigger than we are now. So I think we need to really keep that in mind as we're looking ahead to whatever we're going to build. Also, I think, wasn't there some talk about building a new village hall? So I'm thinking, where's that going?
Village Hall is in the civic campus plan, but this, we're a long ways from making that decision.
Okay.
We've got to get the library and senior center first, and then what we do here and going.
Well, the reason I bring it up is thinking that if, for instance, the library would be built on the lot where the old Methodist church is, then that leaves more room over on this side for the new village hall, senior center. I'm hoping that the youth center is going to have some space. So I just feel like the property over by the old Methodist church, it would be a big asset for our village.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Ray Vogler. I live at 299 North Main Street, and thank you so much for inviting us to this meeting. That's the first thing I wanted to do, was have a shout out to Mike Grace in particular, and then the entire board, that you said you wanted us to come to this meeting, and you asked us to come to not only this one, but the one prior. And I think that's really the building of an excellent relationship between the village board and the community. So I want to thank you very directly for that and let you know that's important to us. And on top of that, I want to put in a few words. I did send an email. Did the board receive the email? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that my thoughts on this are that the land that is the old Methodist church, as you know, I see that as very much a treasure. That's a beautiful lot. It has mature trees, green space. It's kind of on the hill, looking down on Main Street. There's many uses that we could have for that, but based on what I'm hearing, I think that the library and possibly the senior center would be a good fit, but that we think of it more in a community-based project. If we do a library there, the library would have community rooms. Fitchburg has that. I know Janesville has that. And that's okay. And, other libraries do have these community rooms. And what we did is actually toured some of those, some members of our neighborhood. And we found out, just as the previous speaker had talked about, community rooms can bring people together, but they can also generate revenue for the village, because you can be charging or free for certain groups, nonprofits, and then a charge for maybe the profit organizations. But in general, it's a beautiful way to bring people together and have this mixed use within a building. And then the other thing I'd like to bring up is that I think it's important that any building that we design is very beautiful. And I know it's something we're talking about long range, but that's a gorgeous site and we could do a lot with it. And if we do, we can develop and design a building that looks out on the land. And this is something that the other places are doing, Janesville, Fitchburg, Verona. They're taking the outside and bringing it in. And I think that would be an incredible asset to the Oregon Village. On top of that, if we would build a park or a green space and have that part of the design plan and also bring the community in to help with this. I could see like the garden club getting involved. I could see maybe other nonprofit groups wanting to get involved, youth groups, creating the shrubbery area, creating sculptures, you know, really being a part of the process, having benches donated, all of that. I think it's a way to bring the community together. And also, once they become invested in the building by making it happen, they'll want to utilize that building too. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. I know the owners would love to see their property utilized in a positive way, and I think this is a very, very good way forward. And I appreciate you thinking about this. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Leif Olson, 276 North Main Street. I just want to make sure that I am putting my vote. I'm happy with any of the village facilities there in any combination. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
You're way under time.
Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. So next we come to possible board action, possible options. One thing we've done is to direct staff to start working on some of the financial parts of it.
Yep.
We want to do anything else? Or get that first?
I think we should get that first. I think, again, that's an important piece of the puzzle here.
Isn't an important piece of the puzzle also what we would have to pay for the property though? I mean, I'd like to get a ballpark. I don't know if we can get a ballpark number from the property owners, or maybe we have that, but gosh, that would be nice. Does that constitute as negotiating?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if the board's okay, I'm ready to say, let's start negotiating.
It would be nice to have that as part of your proposal or the analysis.
Why wait 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got other things to do with that property too. I mean, there's no guarantee that even if you work out a price, we don't do it in a timely manner, they'll get the property, somebody else might get the property.
I will be, I thought we were gonna end up here, I want to be very upfront with the board. The next 2 weeks, Lisa and I are gonna be working on the budget. I'm just, we have to get the budget done, so we wouldn't be doing a lot of negotiating if that, I mean, we could certainly have a discussion, but we're gonna be able to bring something back. I'm just gonna caution the board that about bringing something back by October 3rd. That's gonna be probably pretty tough.
And that part would have to be in closed session, right, when we talk about negotiating?
Yes, yeah. Mhm.
And I'm not looking for, this is where we are, this is where they are, what do we think? I'm looking for, let's get the process started and get a ballpark.
Yeah.
Just a ballpark.
Would you have time to do that, Mike, to reach out and ask for a?
Sure, I just want to be upfront with the board. Our focus is to get the budget out
Sure.
next 2 weeks, and so.
Well, you better, we can have a meeting on October 3rd.
I know that, that's the point of the meeting. I mean, yeah.
Way to undercommit and overdeliver, Mike.
Yeah, I've learned that's the best thing to do, Jeff, right? No, I certainly think I can give Marshall or Robin a call and talk to him, and, yep.
Does that sound reasonable, Marshall? Just start with just ballpark and see where it goes, and if it doesn't go, we'll wait for more formal action by the board. Okay. Is that okay with people?
Yeah.
Jerry, you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So.
I got it.
That process.
Thank you.
That ties us into nothing at all, just keeps the process going, so that's good. Okay, I think we finished that, right?
I think we did.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to thank the public for being engaged. Thank you for coming and speaking to us and giving your opinion, because that helps so much. Otherwise, sometimes we feel like we're operating in a vacuum, so always feel free to come and tell us the good, the bad, the ugly. We prefer the good, but, you know, we have to listen to it all.
You know, it's not always easy to have a bunch of people here, but in a situation like this, it is, because it's working together, moving forward to the community, so that's good. So, you know, also, just so you know, I mean, there's not a ton of people here from the community, the neighborhood, but I think we're kind of thinking that this pretty much represents a feeling of that area. And I hate to see us move along very far, and all of a sudden, 20 people show up and say, this is not good, so, okay. Laura Gosper, put that in the minutes. She's in charge over there, I think, so. Okay, good, that's what I want to know. Okay, good, thank you.
So Steve, this is brought back at October 3rd, then or not?
We'll see.
If, it depends on time for staff. They've got to do the budget next 2 weeks, but we have a budget meeting October 3rd.
Right.
We
We'll go as
have a
quickly as we can.
budget board meeting on October 3rd. Yep.
Yeah.
It may be the following Monday, to be honest with you. This
Yeah.
being-
That would be better.
Steve, could we do the bills before the finance director has to leave?
That was a nice little smile.
The vouchers, huh?
Yes.
Where the heck are they?
5.
Some in or someplace. These agendas are way too long, there they
And
are.
I gotta find that guy that's doing them.
I know. I'm on, looking for him too, let me tell you.
No, everybody's leaving now.
Okay, so we'll go to item 5, vouchers. We have vouchers tonight in the general operating fund of $164,713.31 for approval.
So moved.
Second.
That's-
Whoa, Jerry.
That's pretty small. Looks like Lisa's not been doing much, so we'll see. It's the price you pay if you leave early. So other questions? I do need to ask that the conversations go out in the hallway, please. It carries over pretty much. Thank you. Are there questions on the vouchers? Seeing none, again, we have a motion and second to approve vouchers, amount $164,713.31. All in favor, oops, roll call, I'm sorry, almost messed that up.
Boudreaux?
Yes.
Carpenter?
Yes.
Staton?
Yes,
Bernier?
Yes.
Brookhauer?
Yes.
Foley?
Yes.
thank you. That motion passes.
Thank you,
You're
everyone.
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to item H,
Sure. See you, Lisa.
in the right place.
You, library, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so item H,
Now we can go in order, Steve.
yeah. Discussion with Library Director Nikki Bush regarding the 2017 library budget and other matters. Items listed are the article from the Municipality Magazine, which is overview of the Library Board Authority, survey results of library accounting practices, discussion moving library budget from general fund to special library fund, and drafting a memorandum of understanding between the village board and library board as a tool for cooperation and funding predictability. So Nikki's going to take 10 to 15 minutes tonight, we talked about, and then this comes back again at our next meeting, October 3rd. So, and we'll have time for us to do questions afterwards if you'd like to.
Do we need to run a timer on this?
I think you do.
Okay.
Do I get warnings every few minutes?
I'll give you 5.
Okay, that'll work. So I thank you all for the opportunity to begin this discussion, and it's billed as a discussion, no decisions at all. This is sort of a preview, a setting the stage for what will be coming in October. Mike asked me to speak a little bit about the interaction between the village and the library boards because it's such an unusual scenario in municipalities. I've included in your packet some slides that I borrowed. I did ask permission to use them from the Department of Public Instruction. That's the state body that oversees public libraries, as well as school libraries and schools in the state of Wisconsin. So that's why their logo's on here. Specifically, well, I don't know if, have you had a chance to read that lovely article, any of you? It's pretty involved, and so I don't want to go into all the details there, but some of the takeaways for me are represented on these slides. One of the questions often that comes up is, well, why are libraries so different? Why do they have their own chapter in the state statutes? This is pretty wild stuff. Well, that was done for a number of reasons, and that's because Wisconsin really wanted to make sure that there was citizen control of public libraries when they came into being. So they wanted this to keep political pressure off of library decisions directly, as well as ensuring that the collection itself and the programming that's offered does not lean in one particular direction or another. We're not supposed to embrace any particular political viewpoint on that, and we really strive to do so. So the library board
as its own governing body, does that. And then it's also directly governed by the people themselves. They'd be citizen members. You don't get reimbursed for being on the library board. People do this for civic reasons. The next slide covers some of what Chapter 43 mandates that the library board do. I include this just to say that it's not all fun and games. It's not just the glory and the power of being on the library board, but that there's a lot of responsibilities that falls on their shoulders. And in mentioning that, I think it's also important to remember just how interconnected the library and the village boards are. So the library is a department of the village. We rely for our funding for the vast amount from the municipality. It's an essential ingredient to be able to do what we do. So it's really important that we continue to foster a really open communication amongst us, and I've been really pleased with the ability to do so far with both the board and the staff at the village. It's a fantastic thing. If you are aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it, then you feel hopefully that there's more trust than there might otherwise be if there weren't. Second slide on page 2 talks about the basic distribution of responsibilities between municipality, library board, and library director. I do just want to kind of touch on what I think is one of the most important ones, which is the first one under municipality, which is sets annual library appropriation. Well, I use this appropriation. You'll see this word come up again and again. What does it mean? Well, it's money set aside by formal action for a specific use. So whenever you determine, so as part of the budget process, you determine how much money you will be giving to the library purposes for that year, and then the library board and the library director then manages those funds and signs off on any expenditures. But you hold the purse strings. So even though it's not an immediate feedback loop, like it might be, if you get to decide, oh yes, let's throw a little bit more extra money on that, it needs to happen right now. You may not have that level of immediate control. The next time the budget season comes around and you say, well, they weren't being judicious with how they used the citizens' money, then that's when that loop comes full circle. Do you have any questions about what I just kind of breezed through here? It is billed as a discussion.
I was on the library board once, so I kind of experienced the.
I do recall seeing your name once upon a time
long
on some
time.
of those old
Yeah.
records. Older,
Yeah.
not old, just
No, old, wouldn't fit. I hate to say it.
Hey,
just
Nikki,
stepped all over that one. Yes.
when did those safeguards get put in place? When did the separate library board?
When Chapter 43 was first put into place. Now, I'm going to go on a limb and assume that they numbered the chapters in the order that they were made, but I'm not really sure.
I think that's correct, yeah.
So pretty early on, there's many more chapters than 43 in the state statutes. So those have been in place forever. One of the things that's sometimes confusing regarding library funding is that there have been some changes that have taken place in the somewhat comparable recent future, or recent past rather, recent future, I'd like that one. It was in 1998 only that we were able to get any funding from the county to help sort of as a, they are paying us back to a certain degree for services previously rendered, so 2 years previously rendered. They give us, they use a very involved formula, we've talked about that. It was only in 98 that first came into place. In 2006, we were able to get a little bit more money, this time from any services that we've rendered, again with a 2-year lag, to counties that are adjacent, residents of counties adjacent to ours who do not have their own library. So there has been, when those came into play, it maybe sometimes it correlates with that there's not as much funding given towards the library because now they have another source at that time in history. But I feel like we need to invest so that we can move forward and meet both the community's needs and expectations, as well as some of those standards that we've been talking about, and the higher expectations that we will be expected to meet when we hit a population of 10,000, which is very close. So in order to be in the library system, we have to operate under Chapter 43, and to operate under Chapter 40, if we don't, we can lose the system funding, and that's an important thing to bear in mind. If we're not in the system, then we can't use LinkCat, which is the library catalog, and if we can't use the library catalog, if we're not in the system, then if we can't use the library catalog, then we are breaking the Dane County standards, which require us to participate in the shared catalog, and it just becomes this snowball effect. So we want to avoid that. There is in your packet a lovely survey on the financial habits of Dane County libraries. This was done as sort of just taking a temperature of, okay, there's 20 libraries in all of Dane County. How do they handle their finances? What are some best practices that we might be able to take out of this? Because we want to set ourselves up for a really strong future. And so there's a few different takeaways that the library board took from the results of the survey, and there was 100% response rate. One of those takeaways was that the library board would like to see the library's operating funds held no longer under the general fund, but under a separate fund. The Department of Public Instruction recommends this for transparency purposes. So that's something that we would like to see happen at the start of the next budget year. Also, Chapter 43 tells us what needs to happen with any unspent funds at the end of the year. And we would like to, that's something we need to report to the state, and as part of our compliance with Chapter 43, we would, now that we have more awareness of this, we'd like to embrace that moving ahead. And also, 80% of Dane County Libraries' capital improvement needs are funded by their municipalities, either and some additional ones are partially funded by their municipalities. Historically, we've not been funded as part of the capital improvement plan, and we would like to see if we can maybe change how that's done. We would like to be included in that. Any questions on the survey or anything I've said so far? I'm trying to be really aware of time here for you. So that brings us to the draft memorandum of understanding. It's hard, it doesn't really show up really well, the word draft that's written across this on the online packet, but it's there. This was something that we had taken from what we've seen work well at a couple other Dane County libraries. And that's basically an agreement that is put in place to guarantee some financial predictability for both the library and the village, so that we know how things are going, how we'd like things to work more or less moving ahead. If I look back at how historically over time, I see different things done at different times, and it makes it difficult to plan in a way that's going to allow us to be the best stewards that we can of taxpayer money. I don't know if you have any questions on the draft. If you're interested, I can try to spell out what we would be agreeing to. This is just putting this forward as something that we would like to be able to discuss. You might consider allowing village staff to enter, some sort of discussion on, is this something that would be truly beneficial for all the parties involved, and not detrimental in any way.
Mike, do you have any opinion on that memorandum of understanding?
Well, so Nikki and I have been talking about this, and there are some things in here that I think make a lot of sense. And whether or not we can get this done before the budget gets adopted, we'll have to see. I think if we already had one in place, I have no problem negotiating or discussing this with Nikki, but I think because this is a brand-new thing, a brand-new MOU, I want the board's input on it. And so I think what we'll do is, I made a note, I'm going to put this on the October 3rd board budget meeting to talk about in greater detail at that point.
Okay.
All right.
One thing, just in terms of this being a conversation, I kind of struggled my way through the packet because it felt like, and this, my limitation as a human being perhaps, but it just felt like there was a lot being asked of me and not a lot being given to me. So relative to how partnerships work, it just seemed like a lot of, and then this is what you'll do, and then this is what you'll do, and then you'll give us money, we'll spend it. Kind of,
Welcome to village government, Jeff. Does anyone ever give us anything?
No,
I'm just kidding. They're
I
always
just don't know
asking.
what else to do with it. Like, I can't turn it into a question.
I know what you mean.
But that's kind of how it felt.
There's not like contractually obligated type thing.
Yes.
It's not actually a binding contract. It's a memorandum of understanding.
Oh, I think Jeff's talking more about just how it works. How everything works, the library board and the funding. And
So I think
all
that
that
the
stuff.
big thing that's happened in the last, Nikki, how long have you been here?
Just over 9 months.
9 months. Since the last 9 months. There's been this different arrangement being discussed by the library board and Nikki with the village. And I particularly, like, for example, taking the library budget out of the general fund is something we've talked about years ago, and the library board at that point didn't want to do that. So there's a lot of things going on, and we thought, rather than putting this on a budget agenda and then also talking about the library budget, we thought tonight was just kind of like, here's a summary of all the things the library board's working on. And doesn't mean the village board has to agree with it. Some things you really have no choice. So most of it's governed by Chapter 43. And that's my opinion about the MOU. I think it's going in the right direction. I do think it needs a little bit of work, and I think the board needs to have a better understanding of the bigger picture, where the library board's going and the village is going in the future. That's my opinion.
That actually, I don't know if you truly heard me or if that was accidental, but that actually goes a long ways, I think, towards what I'm trying to say.
Of course he heard you,
I
Jeff.
heard you, Jeff.
Seriously? Because that doesn't happen often.
I feel like I'm still trying to understand exactly what you're saying, so maybe you can catch me up.
That was fantastic. It was a red letter day.
Happens once in a while, Jeff.
So
I
Nikki, what's the benefit of the things you've talked about so far, those items 1 through, what's the benefit to the village of doing this?
Are you referring to the memorandum?
Yeah, the memorandum of understanding and moving the budget and those types of things.
Well, one, it would get us in compliance, which is super key. It's something that once we're aware of, I think everyone will agree it's in our best interest to update some of those practices.
It gets us into compliance with Dane County or Chapter 43.
So the separate fund piece is not a requirement. That is a recommendation for transparency purposes.
Sorry.
From the Department of Public Instruction.
Okay.
If you look at the very last page of the survey, there's a response from a municipality who's recently gone through some legal difficulties, and they speak to what their auditor says regarding that, and it would be to follow the Department of Public Instruction's recommendations.
Okay.
So, one, having a separate account, not absolutely required, but certainly makes it easier when it comes time to just being able to tell at a quick glance, yep, we're awesome. We're in great shape. The The end of the year funds, that's a legal one that just we need to update how we've done that. As far as being a partner, we call it being a partner, an equal partner as would any other department in the village, have our capital improvement needs be considered in the capital improvement plan and not have to fund that on our own because historically the library has tried to squirrel away a little bit of money for those emergencies, but what turns out is we still have the same carpeting we've had the same carpeting since 1995. There's a lot of things that are falling apart. We haven't had the luxury of replacing them. If we were not worried about how we are going to accomplish those things, then reserving some of the facilities portion of the Dane County payment, which is meant to help cover some of those costs, but can't truly be expected to cover all of them, we would put that towards the operating expenses of the library in the village. So that would be a financial benefit. We would not be asking as much. We'd be asking half as much in the budget as we would if we didn't have that security.
Any other questions at this time? So we're turning the page, right?
All right.
5, 6, and 7?
Yeah, so also included in here, we have information on what the stepped plan is. I talked about how we can try to meet the increased levels of, so that we are able to meet the new levels of Dane County standards that we'll be expected to meet moving ahead, rather than doing it all at once. We have it divided out between 4 years, and that's what we would be requesting, is a fourth of the overall need in each year between now and 2020, the rest of the piece to get us to that goal, rather than, asking for too much too soon. We know it's difficult. No one wants to raise taxes. It's not comfortable or fun for anyone. So that's what that is outlining. And then you have a copy of the draft budget narrative, which also goes into pretty great detail as to where the revenues come from and what our expenses are. And historically, we've basically spent down the reserve funds to the point that that's no longer viable. I think it was an important stopgap measurement that took place, particularly during the recession years. But it's not something that we are able to maintain because that cushion is no longer there in the same way it once was. So we'll be asking for a little bit more this year. And that's a lot of information and a lot of time. I'm sorry that it's sort of disjointed. The different pieces kind of have accumulated over a number of last couple of months, and just looking for the right opportunity to share this with the board. Mike was kind enough to put it all together, and so that's part of why it maybe seems a bit disjointed too.
Because Mike put it together?
No, because it's been adding up over, it's been accumulating over time, because there's other things that you need to address.
Don't let Jeff do that to you, Nikki. Don't.
Just when in doubt, blame it on Mike.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the way we do it.
His big shoulders.
One thing I thought as you did that, it's a lot of information. I'm amazed you pulled that all together in 9 months.
Yeah.
You had to figure out what's going on and do all this.
Yeah. I'm saying there's been a lot going on, so.
It's nice to get this in advance of the budget meeting, and we can kind of go back to the packet.
Yeah, and do let me know if you have questions. My contact information's on the library's website. I'm happy to field any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you. Nice job.
And that goes for the public as well.
Good, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Nikki right now? Okay, we'll go on to item 4, approval of minutes. We have 2 sets, August 15, 2016, and August 22nd, 2016, which was a special meeting. Need one motion for both, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any additions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We've done vouchers. Committee input, anybody wish to address the meeting? I see nobody tonight to do that. Item 7, proclamations and announcements. A, board comments. Anyone?
Actually, interestingly enough about the minutes, I just continue to be amazed at the minutes that you take, Candy. So
Peggy.
Peggy, sorry, Peggy Candy.
That was last week.
It's like 8:15, freaking exhausted. I'm amazed at the minutes that you take. They're just incredibly detailed and accurate, and I don't say it, I just assume it, but thank you. Peggy.
Once in a while, she can't keep up, though.
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
Peggy, 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 Peggy.
We'll let you know when Candy's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't see from here.
That's true, you got it facing her.
It's only been a little over 3 hours.
Okay, one quick comment I'd make. Our church had a person in this week to do some work with the congregation. It was very productive. He was from Texas, and he spent time getting around the village, and he was very complimentary of the village, how it's connected, gives a real sense of community, and really liked the downtown. And it's really nice to have somebody come from another part of the country and feel that way. So
Yeah.
the village is doing a nice job, which is a credit to this board, past boards, and staff. So that was good to hear. Any other board comments?
I think, wasn't there a big soccer tournament in town this last weekend?
There was.
Yeah.
And I was impressed at how well the traffic situation worked out. And I was also impressed with the care of the athletic fields and how they picked up after themselves. I live right on a park, and I know that I looked over there partway through the day and I saw a lot of stuff around, but it was all gone when they left. So I'm very impressed. It was good to have those park areas used.
Yeah, good leadership and workers in the soccer,
Yep.
youth soccer programs.
Great job.
That's great, yeah. Good, thanks, Jerry. Anything else from trustees? Go to staff comments. First is the Wisconsin Election Commission update. Peggy?
I don't have anything new, but I would repeat a little of what I said last week, that anybody who has an absentee request on file, those will be mailed out by this Thursday, September 22nd, and next Monday we will begin absentee voting in the office. If they have any questions, they can certainly call in or stop in.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, the My Meal, My Way kickoff, 11:30 a.m. at Ziggy's on October 6th. Will be noticed as a board gathering. Allison, comments here, please?
Yeah, I've waited.
We have been asked to
3
have
hours.
the microphones closed.
3 hours and 15 minutes. I've been waiting for this moment.
Make the most of it.
You got 3 minutes, Allison.
Mike wanted this noticed as a board gathering because I'm going to be inviting all of you to the grand opening of the My Meal, My Way program at Ziggy's on October 6th at 11:30. Joe Parisi will be there, and hopefully I'll get some press there as well. And again, that's from 11:30 to 1 is the meal itself. Age 60 plus make donations just like they would at the senior center site. We're joining 3 other restaurants within Dane County who are also doing this once a week. There's one in Mount Horeb, one in Monona, and one in DeForest. So I'm very honored that we were chosen to do this. Dane County will be giving us an additional approximately $7,100 to pay for this program. So, do you have any questions? Hopefully, you can make a quick appearance, and it should be exciting. Seniors are all excited about 8 different choices of food.
Well, what a great way for Ziggy's to splash on the scene.
It's a splash for them, but it's great for us too, because there's a lot of seniors who don't have the opportunity to go to restaurants. They can't afford it. There's always the senior center stigma. They feel it's only for poor people. They shouldn't eat the meals there. And this way, they can do this and make a donation, and it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks like a great menu.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm over 60.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
There is,
When do we do Public Works budget?
Oh, it's coming up. I may put that on next Monday night.
Yeah, I've
if you
got
want.
that down.
You'll forget that comment by then, Steve.
No, I wrote it down. It's written down. You wait, you'll see when that comes back. It will not be
That
forgotten.
will go in the minutes.
Okay. So good, that sounds great. I'm gonna catch myself after that. Anything else on that, anyone? And then we have upcoming meetings. That's already changed, Mike.
Yeah, I know. So, but we do have, so we have a meeting next Monday night, and then we do have the joint meeting with the towns, our annual meeting with the towns and Village of Brooklyn and the Fire District and the Senior Center.
Okay, thank you. The next three items we have done.
And can I ask you one question about the village board budget meetings? So we're going to have dinner at each, or before each meeting. And so the question is, do you want to have dinner from 4:30 to 5, and start the meeting at 5, continue the meetings at 5 o'clock, or dinner at 5 and start the meetings at 5:30? What's your preference? For staff, it doesn't matter.
Getting here by 4:30 is tough for me.
Okay.
5 is tough, but I make it work almost every week.
Okay, so, sounds like 5 o'clock.
I don't know, is that okay with
Dinner
everybody
5 to
else?
5:30, start the meeting at 5:30.
Does that make,
Does that work,
okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how much more food I could eat if I got here before.
All right, so we'll have dinner at 5 and the meeting's at 5. I think that's what we did last,
it'll
right?
be all gone by the time we get here.
Yeah, the 3-hour meeting is too long for
Put this
Jeff,
on
let
my
me tell you.
calendar.
I'll hide it. I'll hide the food from Jeff.
Anything else from staff?
That's it, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so item D, discussion possible action resolution number 16-29, adopting second amendment to the 2016 salary schedule effective 9/11/16 for non-representative employees. Recommended motion is adopt resolution 1629. We did the first part of this last week, right?
So moved.
Yep.
We just had to wait for we didn't have a supermajority last week that we.
Well, we always, the board sort of made the motion, and then we have to do it by resolution technically, so that's what we're doing tonight.
Okay. So we got that motion in second?
I think that's second.
Any questions? Spent time on this last time, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item E, Police Department matters. Item 1, August through September investigation activity report. 2, summary major crimes, 7/2016 to 9/12/16, the status of K-9 in schools. So, Chief, you will please.
As you can see, we've been plenty busy. Lots of investigations happening in the village, I think, more than people realize. They both kind of summarize the same type of thing, as far as the major crimes go in the village. And then, any questions on those?
No, they're very informative, I think. Thank you.
Sure. Status of the K-9 in the schools, last Monday night, the school board approved to use the K-9s in the schools for this school year only, and sort of a trial basis to do that. But, I'm cautiously optimistic that this will lead to further expansion of it. However, having said that, I don't know what they're going to rate the success of this program on. They haven't given us any specifics on what's going to be successful or what's not. So they've basically said that we need to work with the police department and the school officials need to work together to come up with a plan and then go ahead and work that through this school year. So we'll see how that goes. But again, I think I need to get some clarification from the school board on what they are going to determine a successful program to be.
Okay. It's nice to know what the goal is.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a moving target. Good. Any questions for Chief? Item F, Oregon Area Fire EMS information. This report that we get.
And the interim chief will continue to do these.
Okay. Item G, review of Village Administrator's Master Calendar 2016.
Did the board have any questions on it?
Wake up, Steve.
I'm just catching up with it.
We're on H.
I got it. My old eyes don't work as fast as they used to. Okay.
this time.
Yeah, you best not.
Already been censured.
It's just beginning. Item H, 2017 budget, discussion of draft 2017 tax levy sheet and League of Wisconsin's capital buzz regarding Department of Revenue changing rules on expenditure restraint program.
So on the levy, what was in the packet showed an increase of about $113 for an average house. And we got the home values from Lee, so we think they're accurate. And then in your plastic folder was an update. We received some really good news on health insurance last week, which then reduced the amount to $104 increase for an average house. And I think what Lisa and I wanted to know, we just wanted to sort of say, we have the department heads' numbers basically plugged in. There still has to be a lot of work done on this, but just as a comparison, the taxes for 16 on an average house went up about $35. So this is a pretty big difference. When you look at the spreadsheet and you see it, that says general fund of $272,000 going up. Just as a comparison, for this year, it was only $79,000. But the board needs to remember what's in there is a brand new police officer position, about $82,000, about $20,000